can hear it.
Every description of God that I've heard holds God to be all-powerful, very typical, and all good. And I see earthquakes and tornadoes and disease, childhood leukemia, and I see all of this and I say, I do not see evidence of both of those being true simultaneously. If there is a God, the God is either not all-powerful or not all good.
There we go. Some food for thought to kick off this amazing Wednesday night. This is very much a thrown together at the last minute podcast. Great to have you with us, Neil deGrasse Tyson there. I needed a bit of hit of that. I was probably driving my one and only partner on the podcast tonight up the wall with his Neil deGrasse concept and ideas about God, the universe, and everything in between. But g'day, it's great to have you with us tonight. This Wednesday, the 23rd of April, we are broadcasting live on YouTube from Perth in Western Australia. We have been off and on over the last few weeks. Life gets busy and busier and busier and busier, depending on what you're doing. So it's just Luke and I tonight. So g'day, Luke. Good to have you along, mate. Appreciate it.
Thanks, mate. Good to be here as always. And we've got Jenk with us already as well. So at least there's three of us.
Oh, have we? He is always, look, no matter how long a break we take.
Well, legend.
He is there. Jenk, well done. What up, gents? Mate, we are fabulous. Thank you so much for your incredible loyalty. The check's in the mail. If you haven't already got it yet, just address any complaints to Luke. Care of no fixed address, and you should
I'll read them
fine.
all.
But yeah, mate, it's it is the ongoing frustrating time with various things happening, you know, families, health issues, all sorts of stuff. It disrupts, and here we are. So look, tonight, Jenkins, for those of you who may be joining us, great to have your company tonight. We're just going, there's no scripts, there's nothing. We're making it up as we go along. We thought we'd touch on, Luke and I were talking earlier when we decided to give this a crack, because, of course, Richard, him and I started this podcast initially over a year ago, is busy doing intelligent work. You know, those smart people who know all that
He wants to enforce us to call him Dr. Rich. That's what it is.
Yeah. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I'll finish a PhD he just wants to update his business card, I think. That's really what it comes down to.
Well, but, I mean, good luck to him.
Fair enough. Yeah, don't blame him.
You know, Dr. Dick, I mean, that works for me. Yeah,
that's a business card.
I mean, Dr. Richard Stalls, I mean, that's fairly impressive. I'm not quite sure what doctorate he's talking about, what he will be a doctor in, whether it's theology or philosophy or what. But you probably know more than me about that, Luke. But just because he's my nephew-in-law doesn't mean that I should know anything.
Yeah, it's not neurosurgery. I know that for sure.
No, so Rich has got about a month we're talking about tonight, which is before he'll be able to get back with us again. Suresh continues to have a very busy life, and Jace is no longer with us on the podcast. So we rely heavily on your contribution, your whatever it is you want to talk about. We've got the Easter to talk about. If need be, we'll obviously talk about the sad death of the Argentinian Pope Francis. No longer with us. We haven't heard, as far as I'm aware, certainly here in the West, anything. As you may know, there's a lot of cardinals in the Vatican City at the moment. 80% of them were put there because of Pope Francis, and he selected those. There's a lot of people, including a 45-year-old Aussie bloke.
Is that right?
He's got Buckley's chance of becoming a pope because of the fact that he's Australian, and there's not likely to be a pope from the UK or America or Australia, as far as we can see. So there's a 45-year-old Australian gentleman who's there. And of course, they all have a secret ballot. They all write down who they think should be pope on a piece of paper. And if it comes out the majority doesn't rule, then it all goes into the fire and it gets burnt. And people see black smoke coming out the chimney and they go, we don't have a pope. That continues on in secrecy for a damn long time until there is a majority. And then they decide who the pope is. And then there's a white smoke which bellows from the chimneys. And that's the signal there is a new pope. So at this stage, as far as I'm aware, if I'm wrong, please correct me, that we don't have a pope as yet. So Pope Francis passed away after a relatively lengthy illness and seemed to be doing okay, but then had a stroke, and I think he was 88, if memory serves me correctly.
Yeah.
Sad.
I don't know if you'd have to be wired a certain way. I think it's a big responsibility. That's a big job.
Almost as big as like being the president of the United States in many ways, isn't it? Because
and in some ways bigger. Yeah, obviously
the world rests. That's right. The whole world of Catholics rests on his shoulders.
In fact, far more people under you, I guess, in that sense, than I'd say there'd be more Catholics in the world than there would be American citizens.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you wield a lot of power. So I guess it's important to get the right person in. Even if you're not Catholic, it has an impact on the world and on. It's pretty interesting. There's that movie Conclave. I haven't watched it yet. I've been hanging to watch it.
No, I've heard so much about it. Everyone that's seen it who was involved with the whole, I guess, the journalistic point of view of the Pope dying have seen it and said it's absolutely the most accurate to how it actually all works. So cannot wait for that. Interesting to know whether or not the decision to make that film was based upon the age of Pope Francis, understanding that, of course, he's not going to live forever, and the film could come out at around about the time when he may pass, and that certainly is what's happened. But apparently, it's a ripper. If you've seen it, love to hear from you. Conclave, it's called, and it's supposed to be very, very good. Looking forward to seeing it.
It's quite an interesting process. Very secretive. From what I understand, there would be a lot, and I assume that's what the movie goes into. I'm hanging to watch it, but a lot of the politics and things that would go on in order to work out who gets that top spot. Very interesting. But,
and of course, Luke and I are talking about from our perspective, and I probably shouldn't try and speak on behalf of Luke from my own perspective. It's a very difficult situation to face as an atheist, as a non-believer. I wasn't a huge fan of the Catholic Church for obvious reasons. They are a massively powerful organization who have been responsible for more child rape, pedophilia, and stuff like that within the Catholic Church for a long, long time. And the way they've handled it, including Pope Francis, did certainly change things quite a bit. But his predecessor was really responsible for just making sure that all of this was kept hidden, and those people and those priests who were guilty were sent off to continue on as priests, being able to be subjected to, well, not being able to be subjected to, but certainly not by being shut down and disgraced, but they'll continue on. And that in itself, I have many, many gripes about the Catholic Church as a filthy rich organization, not doing an awful lot for women's liberation, and seeing so many powerful men. I can't remember the numbers of how many there actually are at Vatican City at the moment, but extraordinary number. There's been one female pope, I think it was around the year 500. I can't remember the exact when it was, but there has been a female pope. But you wouldn't imagine there would be another one. And the Pope has lots to be the Catholic Church has lots to be embarrassed about, lots to be ashamed about. And to me, the glorification of anything to do with the Catholic Church, to me personally, and I don't want to upset any of our Catholic viewers, but it's actually quite obscene to me, such a corrupt organization pretending and parading to be all good things representing God, and what they have done to the world and to people, and exploitation and the way they have managed the poor is just, I'm sorry, but from my perspective, it's disgraceful. I'm not bagging your Pope. I'm not bagging your commitment and your love for God and whatever it is that you believe in. But certainly everyone must admit that the Catholic Church is nothing short of a disgrace.
Yeah, I mean, I share a lot of the sentiment. And I'm not Catholic myself, although Christian from I guess the more Protestant background. Although I've got a lot of love and respect for my Catholic brothers and sisters in the faith.
Sure.
And
yes.
whilst I disagree with certainly elements of their theology, and I'm the first to come up against that idea of one big, rich, powerful organization that is speaking on behalf of God, but with significant self-interest. And that's not a Catholic exclusive. We see that in different areas in the Protestant church as well, and the church far wide. But not in all areas. And I think the problem with the Catholic Church, and I agree with you, the predecessor of Pope Francis was ultimately up the top. So the buck stops with you. So you are responsible for what's going on, whether you kind of know about how much you know about and or not. You are responsible. And I think it's easy to say, well, these individual priests who were doing these horrific things are the ones responsible, and you can't blame the church for these individuals. You can blame the church for a culture that enables that sort of predatory behavior by not stamping it out visibly, but like you said, by finding out what something is going on and then moving a priest to another parish, and to try and manage the PR rather than the safety of the parishioners in this new parish, where there's there's accusations of molestation and whatnot are now going to occur somewhere else, and that's inexcusable, and that is a cultural problem. That is an organisation problem, and that rightfully so was exposed and has been hopefully corrected. And I know that great measures have happened. So yeah, but I mean, the Catholic Church and certainly other areas of the church have been responsible for some atrocities over the years, talking with crusades and all sorts of things. So these organizations can certainly have periods of time where they lose sight completely of what they're actually supposed to be doing, and actually it becomes about something completely separate to that. I think the only way you can change that, like any organization, is to steer that culture back, and that has to start at the top, like we were saying earlier. And that's why for me it's a real it's a bit of a tragedy that Pope Francis has gone, because I think he, whilst not perfect as none of us are, he really seemed quite progressive, and I think he really tried to steer the church back from that and to a greater focus on justice and on love and reconciliation, and actually bridging the barrier between other faiths, between people who aren't of any sort of faith. He was very much that sort of like a a peacemaker rather than someone who's interested in consolidating his own power. And there's many instances which I'm sure we'll talk about, but it's a shame. I truly do hope that the next pope that comes in follows his example and continues to mend some of the hurt and brokenness that the Catholic Church has inflicted with relationships with all sorts of different communities, and continue to mend those, because humanity only gets better if we're united, not fractured. We don't need more fracturing. There's enough of that going on. We need more reconciliation, more peacemakers, and more bridge building.
Yeah, and hopefully we can watch that movie and might shed a little bit of light on exactly what's happening. I have no aware of the impact of Pope Francis as far as what we've been talking about with the I guess one of the greatest sins that the Catholic Church has ever been responsible for. And I've seen so many and heard so many great things about the man, and anything I say has got nothing to do with any joy or anything feeling good about the death of anyone. I don't wish that upon anyone. And what an incredibly difficult job he had, and maybe he had a desire to completely and utterly expose, fix up, repair, change, do everything that you could possibly do as a human being and as a spiritual leader, as God's representative on earth. And maybe he didn't have the power to do that. I'm not sure. Again, this film may indicate to the level of power. Because if people just think that the Pope is just like a normal bloke, like a priest or a pastor at the front of the church talking to people about stuff and doesn't have power, we are talking wealth and power beyond anyone's imagination. And as we know, the very second that you have power and wealth, particularly with men, not so much with women, but particularly with men, you are guaranteed to have corruption. You're guaranteed to have slurs on your name. You're guaranteed to have accusations of some really, really nasty stuff going on, which kinds of leads into the area of the nastiness of politics often. And this is supposed to be a man and a group of chosen men, sometimes women, but mainly chosen men, who are meant to be representing God and Jesus on earth. That's extraordinary. That's all right, what's my job here? What am I doing? Okay, here, let's list out the things that you're doing. This character Jesus that okay. What we're going to do is we're going to follow everything he does, and we're going to represent him as best we can in every way, shape, and form, so that the Catholic Church is only seen as being a loving, caring, nurturing organization of people. Even calling it organization to me is bad enough. I have to choke on that word, because it shouldn't be referred to as an organization per se. But what you look at it and what it's gone through and how it manages to hold its head above any level of disgrace and shame is extraordinary. If you, to me, Luke, one of the best ways to I think to look at the character, and whether you believe Jesus is the Son of God or not, doesn't matter. It's who he was as a man alone, let alone as a representative of God, but as a man. And you line him up with any kind of religious group and just see how they compare, and then that gives you an insight really into just how far religion is actually away from representing the character of Jesus Christ, who is their leader, their Lord, their God, everything. It's like, for real, is is that representation of Jesus in any way, shape, or form? It's anyway. It does my head in.
End up becoming the very thing, in some cases, that Jesus was rallying against, this form of religious hypocrisy, this form of being clean on the outside and dirty on the in, which is a part of a human condition, but also can be from an organization perspective, from a religion perspective. Jesus didn't come to start a religion. He wasn't starting a religion. He wasn't starting a denomination. That was something that was formed after him, and that's
Right.
fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Religion is just a word for man's attempt to codify, to make some replicable pattern of how do we follow this man? You know, how do we continue this work? Yeah, and that's okay, but it can become something in and of itself, especially when you get to that sort of size and that sort of power, because power is corrupting. It doesn't matter whether you're a small business owner, whether you're the CEO of a big company, a president, or the Pope. It can be absolutely corrupting. It would take an enormous amount of maturity and willpower, and perhaps that's why it's good that the popes tend to be quite old. You know, maybe you need to have that level of experience in life to be able to have the strength to be able to withhold your conviction, withstand the pressures to actually renege on your convictions. So you can imagine everything that comes out of your mouth as the Pope, everything that's delivered, everything that you write, everything that you speak is analyzed and scrutinized and has the capacity to actually shape belief, to shape dogma, to shape people's understanding, and to impact, to have an enormous impact. This is not me preaching on a weekend to however many people, or someone, even a mega church pastor preaching to thousands of people. This is someone who, when he speaks, billions of people are listening and reading and taking that on board. So what you say about certain things carries such weight. So you can imagine the amount of advisors, the amount of cardinals and things. Some of them are conservative, some of them are more progressive. They're all Catholic, but they're different flavors. They got different agendas, and they would all be in his ear saying, "Hey, make sure you steer it this way. Make sure you steer it that way." You would have to have enormous conviction of self and belief to be able to withstand that, and to kind of put it forward. That's why I have an enormous amount of respect for the work that he did in bridging a lot of that, with the LGBTQ community, with Gaza, with all sorts of stuff. Even little things, when he came out and said that he believes, like he's just said explicitly, all creatures that pass, all pets that pass are in heaven because all creatures are with God. And that's definitive. He's like that. If he says something like that, that becomes the definitive position. It's
right.
Like that seems like such a small thing, but we've spoken about it several times. It's just an illustration of anything he says carries a lot of weight. So it would be. It's why it's important to have the right person in there, I guess.
Yeah, and be interesting to see. It's quite interesting how fascinating it is to actually watch what's going on, because it is something that impacts just about anyone, either in a nice way or in an opposition way. But it's real. It happens, and we're going to get the Jenkins second to put a couple of comments on, but I want to ask you, why do you think that they feel the need to have the power and the wealth? I understand perhaps the beginnings.
Yeah.
How would they? Because he's also, the top dog. He's held responsible, the Pope, for all aspects of the church. He has tons of people helping him. Obviously, it's too big a job for one person. But why in 2025 do you think they sit down and say, do we really need this much wealth if we're not going to do, with art and incredibly valuable artifacts and all sorts of stuff worth millions and perhaps billions and billions and billions of dollars?
Yeah.
What's the
real
point?
estate? Real estate's their big one.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, think about all the Catholic schools, even in Perth.
Oh my goodness!
And the Catholic Church owns them. So you look at Santa Maria down in Fremantle. It's on however many acres, and it's in Bicton is in the middle of it all,
Yeah.
in Adderdale, and you just go, what's that? What is that worth? And that's just one. Yeah, and then you do that in every city, and then look at all the cities around the world. It's real estate is enormous. It's a really good question, because you can. It's a hard thing, right? And that's I think you're right. It must go. The Pope has ultimate power. Like, we talk about wealth, and so the wealth of the Pope. But I don't think he's not really in a position to enjoy any of that wealth, like a Russian oligarch would, or even like a mega church pastor would, where he's got multiple cars and big properties and this and that. I don't think that the Pope on paper might be very wealthy, being in charge of it all, but he's can't do anything with it. He's not using it. But the one thing you're right, though, is if you're preaching about feeding the poor and doing all that sort of stuff and making a difference and appealing to people to live those commands of Jesus, to lift up those on the margins, to feed the poor, to heal the sick, and you're sitting on artwork that's worth billions of dollars just in your backyard. Yeah, at what point do you think, well, what if we were to sell this and use that money to fund this? I think that would be an incredible thing to do. A church that cannibalizes itself for the good of others is the best kind of church you could possibly have. I think that's the true church. But and Pope Francis strikes me as the kind of guy that would have been willing to do that. But I think it must be beyond him. It must just be.
Yeah, he would not have the power.
Theological say and power, but maybe not in terms of control of the assets. But the reason it's so large and huge is the history. We're talking thousands of years of, what was it, since say 500, I think, something like 1,500 years of enormous wealth accumulation, particularly through the medieval period, in the Middle Ages and up. And then, so you then end up being this organization with an enormous catalogue of assets. But
what is that wealth achieving? I mean, everyone's having a go at.
Well, correct. That's exactly right.
The oligarchs in America and what they could do, particularly Bezos and Zuckerberg. Everyone's having a go at them, being able to change the world poverty. I would love to know on paper, when you talk about the world of Catholicism and the value of as you say, about real estate, art, artifacts, how much, surely combined together, they would have enough money to end poverty in the world.
Well, yeah,
and if Jesus popped up now and saw their bank account, I'd give you the big tip what he'd be doing with it, and he wouldn't be having it stored away in a safe somewhere. And this is what makes me so angry, Luke, about the hypocrisy. They one half of the world just absolutely adores the Catholic Church and adores the Vatican and adores whatever Pope is in power, and how wonderful, and the stories of Mother Teresa and how incredibly generous they are. And yet there's this incredible wealth that could fix so many problems in the world, and they won't. They choose not to. There seems to be this bizarre security blanket of wealth that they constantly need to have because they always have. So they are more power hungry, almost, than someone like Trump or someone like Putin. The hunger for power. But what does it achieve for the people who they're representing? What does that achieve for if Jesus came back now and said, "Okay, show me what you're doing, and we'll see how it fits in with my message"? They would know straight away that it does not, in any way, shape, or form. There's some things that would fit in with the teachings of Christ, some things, but I would hazard a guess to say the vast majority of them would be at loggerheads with anything that Jesus was talking about. And if those people, and how do the popes read the holy book and somehow look at it and go, yep, we're doing it right. We are doing it right. It's crazy.
I agree.
Absolutely crazy. I just want to jump onto Jenk for a couple of seconds. Not jump on him, literally, metaphorically speaking, just because he's got a comment about. I saw that a large amount of gay pornography consumption can be traced to Vatican IP addresses. If priests can't hack celibacy, they should let priests marry. I agree 100%. Now, I'm not going to confirm or agree with that that claim, because I have no reason to believe, without any kind of evidence, that it is true. That is a huge claim. Jenk, if you've got anything to add to that to prove that that's actually true, or whether it's been, falsified, or that's a huge claim that gay pornography can be traced to Vatican IP addresses. I mean, that may just be a crazy accusation. So I would just advise about making an accusation like that unless you have actual proof, because that's probably information from someone, and may actually contain no legitimacy. We don't need to make up stuff in order to hold the Catholic Church accountable for what it is that they do. So just be careful about making statements like that. There may be no truth to that whatsoever. However, it has always been a contested argument that priests should be able to marry, and that would pretty much, you would think, to a large degree, not totally, but a large degree, would also solve a lot of the problems within many. And the proof of how human beings act is many men, tough men, big men, strong men, straight men, go into jail. There is a lot, and they're not gay. They're not switching to suddenly becoming gay because they're in prisons with other men, but they are the homosexual acts. The desire for men goes on, and the same with women in women's prisons. Doesn't mean they're gay. That's what happens when you separate people and put them in that situation, which is completely unnatural.
Well, in prisons, it's more of a domination thing. It's it becomes it's more of a power. It's about power dynamics. So it's a humiliation of someone in the sense of, I'm more powerful, I'm going to dominate you in this way, which is totally different to a same-sex attracted couple falling in love and getting married outside of those walls. It's a thing. And interestingly, what happens in prison in that sense is far, far, far closer to what was happening at the time that the Bible was the New Testament was written, in those early Roman first century Palestine. That was very much the case. It was there were these acts that were taken, and homosexual acts they weren't same-sex attracted, loving, consensual couples. They were acts of dominance over one another. And that's a lot of the times when Paul's talking about that and he's sort of saying these things, he's referring to that. He's referring to unequal power dynamics between two men and the humiliation and domination of another, and how that's not right. And then we interpret that today as, so being homosexual isn't right. Well, it's like, no, that's not what he's talking about. He's not referring to these, Bob and John who happen to fall in love and want to live in a picket fence. Like, that's not what was going on. He's saying dominating someone in this way is not right, and that's what we see in prisons. But I think it's a really interesting thing to say that that if they can't act celibacy, they should let priests marry. Absolutely.
I've seen no biblical precedents to that either, by the way, about priests not being able to. I mean, not being able to marry. That's not my understanding of any biblical law or rule.
No. I think. Paul says somewhere that you shouldn't marry, but he wasn't actually talking about ministers. He's just saying, like, if you want to avoid trouble, don't get married, basically. But that's not something that should be taken as that. But I mean, these things tend to happen. They snowball into something. But I think it's causing more problems than it's solving, really. It
doesn't work. What is the reason for not having it, as opposed to the reason given for setting people up? And again, it's power with priests as well. A priest, I don't know, and I'm sure, no doubt, there has been stories and actual situations where this has happened, and I can't say I've seen that, but I would imagine there would be priests who would be in gay, homosexual, very, very clandestine, obviously, relationships with other people within the clergy.
Oh, of course.
But they also pick on kids because they're vulnerable and they're more powerful, and they're using the trust and the power of all of the things that you're talking about with guys in prison as a power act. Not always, but there's not often two prisoners who have a loving homosexual relationship who weren't gay or aren't gay and weren't gay on the outside, nor are they on the inside of prison. The power over children is the most exploitative part of what it is that they're doing. And then, so instead of the Catholic Church, like, this is what really shits me about, instead of saying, okay, there's nothing really specific about the use of condoms in the Bible. It's all about wasting the seed, and et cetera, et cetera. So let's forget about that and solve the AIDS problem in Uganda, or save the AIDS
100%.
problem throughout America, instead of saying, no, this is what shits me about the Pope. They're held in such high esteem, but they are so weak that they can't even make a statement or a decision going, you know what? That's it. Millions of people have died, and telling them to be celibate, unmarried, non-sexual, allegedly, people telling people to be celibate and not practice sex, not have sex with your husband and wife because of AIDS, while in the meantime raping children. Telling people that you can't have a condom, that's against God's law somewhere about using a condom. It's much better to let people die than it is to just say, okay, enough of this. This is crazy. We need.
And then outlawing abortion, and do you know what I mean? It's just like, well, they can't practice safe sex, and this is what's going to happen. But I think that pedophilia it's got to stand on its own. I don't think that could be related to not being able to, forcing them to be celibate, because I think forcing them to be celibate certainly would lead to, like I said, clandestine relationships, with people, either heterosexual or homosexual, whatever. It certainly would lead to an increase in the use of pornography, gay pornography or heterosexual pornography, because they're oppressing, they're repressing something within themselves, and it's coming out in those ways. But that repressing shouldn't come out in the ways of being predatory over children. And that's why we see people who are in happily married relationships, people's uncles and neighbors and this and that are pedophiles, and they still will perpetrate this act either on their own children or on other people's, even though they're in their own relationship, because it's something it's some horrific whatever it is, I don't know, sickness, illness, mental illness. It's not a healthy sexual it cannot be defined as sexual orientation, which some people have argued for. It's not, because there's no consenting partner. It's like if the object of your affection is not able to consent, like a child, then it's not a valid orientation. It's predatory behavior. So I think, but in an organization as big as that, it's sadly, I think people that have that sort of predisposition often will look for positions of authority, of power, like you said, where they are able to dominate and they have that power to have access. And that's not just in the Catholic Church. You see that in Sunday school teachers, and also not all of them is rare, but these are, and teachers, these are the positions that these sort of people will try to get themselves into, because you've got access to this stuff. And it's horrible. But then, like we said before, it's on the organization, once they are aware of that, to stamp that out completely. But I don't think it's fair for them to have to repress themselves either. Not pedophiles, but people with healthy sexual orientations. They should be able to do that.
Yeah. Jenk, Mother Teresa was a moral monster. She intentionally caused pain under her care, thinking that it was good for them because Christ suffered. Now, this is, I would imagine you've probably read a bit of Christopher Hitchens and his writings about Mother Teresa. He very much doesn't give Mother Teresa any credit at all for the oppression of women, and has often said, or did often say before he passed, that the way to get rid of poverty and oppression in poor countries is to liberate women, as opposed to the oppression that Mother Teresa stood by. Now, I have no doubt that she probably was well intended in her belief that that's the way to fix things, and maybe in spite of understanding that wasn't the case, certainly didn't stop her. And she's one of these incredibly divisive person in the sense that she's been held up as, when I was a kid, as being, a marvel, a hero, an amazing person. But if you dig deeper and listen to other people's information, including Christopher Hitchens, he also described her, I think, as a moral monster. Something which is, you cannot say anything more divisive within a Catholic environment than saying that about Mother Teresa, because there are people who just think she was just 100% perfection and amazing. But if you look into it, she did very little for liberating women at all. In what she did, it seemed quite, superficially very, very good and moral. But no, so Jenk, with you on that one. If, like Jenk, you want to be a part of our podcast tonight, please jump on and have an opinion. What do you think about the Pope? Are you Catholic? Are you disgusted with our discussion about the Pope and the Catholic Church and what it represents and stands for? And make no mistake, Luke and I would love to see the Catholic Church being what we think the Catholic Church could be, and more importantly, what it should be, because it doesn't represent. If you remember, there's one single element that the Catholic Church is trying to create, and that is the character of Christ and what he stood for. That's what the Catholic Church is there for. That's what every claim of every Christian and every church and every group of people around the world who claim to represent Christ need to represent Christ in every shape and form. And if there's an organization like the Catholic Church who are turning a blind eye to rape and molestation and pedophilia of children, and sending off guilty priests to be in charge of other parishes around the world in lesser known places, so they're not known, that is about as abhorrent as you can get. There's nothing more disgraceful and disgusting than that, allowing that to happen. And who can stop that from happening within the Catholic Church? Any of us? No, we have no power to do that. It is entirely the responsibility of the Catholic Church. And yet all we ever see is, Pope Francis, and as we said, there's nothing against him per se. We don't know what he would like to have done. He is just a man. He's not like Trump. Trump does whatever he likes and everyone jumps up and down. It's not like that in the system in Vatican City. I'm sure it's not like that. The same, it's not like that with whatever political party and whatever country you're involved with. There's the head of the country, but they don't have the ultimate say to do whatever it is that they please and whatever they do. And I'm sure that was the same for Pope Francis. He may have, knowing what a lovely man he was, been absolutely as disgusted as we are.
I agree. I tend to get this.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I heard nothing but praises about his beautiful character and his kissing the feet of doing things that Christ did in a very humble way to represent people and to love people and to care for them and do the right thing. But at the end of the day, regardless of all that, he's still the head of that organization, and it's still happening.
Yeah.
It's all still happening. All the muck and all the crap and all of the bullshit symbolism that represents nothing within the Catholic Church is still happening in 2025. And whoever the new Pope is, whoever that may be, wow, what a job you have got ahead of you. And I don't know what it is you hope to achieve. There are many conservative potentials in waiting around to vote to hopefully be the next Pope. There are many more liberal. There's many popular. There's unpopular. As I said, 80% of the clergy that are there at the moment was selected by Pope Francis. Now, hopefully, because he would hope that someone that gets voted to be the Pope is going to be someone like him.
Yes.
He wants someone like him. He doesn't want a conservative. He doesn't want a liberal. He wants someone like, and he was very liberal in comparative to
very progressive.
Probably the most liberal of all of the popes that we've ever had.
Definitely in my lifetime. Yeah. And you would hope that he's stacked the decks a bit, with
well, you would think if he's gone through and selected 80% of, I can't remember how many there are there, but there's a lot, a hell of a lot, maybe, I don't know, over 100 of clergy from around the world. And 80% of them are there with his selection to hopefully that they can be more like him and even be more liberating and take the Catholic Church to the next level. But they have got their work cut out for them. Wow. So much work. Well,
it's a bit like I tend to think of it like this is the thing with organizations. The bigger they get, the harder it is to make small changes, let alone widespread changes like we're talking. It's like if you're driving a Hyundai Getz, you can chuck the handbrake and do a 180 and start heading back in the other direction. If you're driving a road train, it's a whole nother thing, and if you're driving an actual train, what do? It's like it's so big and so vast. There are so many moving parts, and there are so many advisors and people of power and influence, and also it's just to make these changes that we're talking about. I feel like it has to happen over decades. It shouldn't. It should be able to happen quickly, but for whatever reason, so you just hope that they start doing this. I'd be an advocate for them selling a bunch of stuff, changing the whole thing, erasing world poverty, and then doing a 180 overnight. I'd love that. And you can do that.
Yes.
Logistically, it's insane. You have to burn the thing to the ground to really do that. But that's okay. But realistically, they're not going to do that. No one is going to do that. So the best you can hope for is that they start doing a 180, they start turning around. It might take a few popes to do it, but all it's going to take is one pope who's ultra conservative to hit the brakes on that and start course correcting, and then we're back to where we were. It's really hard. It's actually quite defeating.
It's interesting, Luke. I'm talking about the all of the gentlemen coming in from all countries around the world to put their 2 bobs worth in and try and get the top job. And what's interesting is that they vote, they put down a name on a piece of paper, and if it doesn't work, then as I said, they throw all the paper in the fire and burn it. But what I find interesting is that they claim that they're not to be in the way. Their vote, whilst will determine who the Pope will be, is meant to be God's decisions through the power of the Holy Spirit. So I get confused. Which is it? If you are relying on God through the power of the Holy Spirit to decide who the right Pope is, not who other men think the right pope is, but who God. And I don't subscribe to any of this, obviously, but I'm just saying what it is. They are voting, and then the Holy Spirit is going to decide, well, why don't we just cut out the middleman and pretend, as they do with everything within the Catholic Church, who the Holy Spirit has inspired. Do you know what I mean? It seems it's like we believe in God, we believe in the Holy Spirit, but not enough to just rely on the Holy Spirit making the decision. We're going to actually write on a piece of paper, tons of us people, and decide. I mean, what are the chances of the majority ruling anyway? I mean, everyone's going to vote for themselves or their mate or something, surely, aren't they? So this is why it takes so damn long for them to come up with a pope.
Because there'd be all sorts of power plays. There'd be all sorts of alliances and games that would go on. It's hard, realistically, it's probably the better way than just saying, well, one person decides who the Holy Spirit is going to say, because someone has to interpret that. And there's a long history. And I, as a believer of the Holy Spirit, as a believer of there being the Spirit of God that can actually speak truth and all that sort of stuff. That's, as a Christian, I believe that, but I've also seen it manipulated. I've seen it manipulated in circles that I've been in, let alone throughout church history. Where you see it in the Bible, where people say, "Oh, the Spirit of God told me to come and murder all of these people."
Heard that, yeah.
God didn't do that. God said nothing about that. You wanted to murder all these people, and then you said that God told you to do it for whatever reason, and so it's fraught with danger, that sort of stuff. So I guess that more democratic voting is not a bad way to go about it. But in saying that, the idea that they're led by the Holy Spirit to write a name down that's amazing in theory. And I would be so happy if that was truly the case. If every single time, and I'm sure there would be cardinals that genuinely do that, that feel led to a certain name. And will have the capacity to listen to the Holy Spirit to do that. But there's certainly be many people that don't, that are going to put down a name of whoever they're alliance with or their own name or whatever it is. And then it's easy to write down a name, and then whoever the Pope ends up being saying, well, there you go, that's who God wanted. But it's a man's game, it's men who are in there doing it. Yep. I don't know how much the Holy Spirit, the Holy Spirit's not going to override a bunch of powerful factions within that group who have elected someone. Do you know what I mean? It's not going to. It's not like Harry Potter, where a name just comes out of a hat. It's like that's not how it works. So, yeah, it's hard.
There's a word. There's a word that comes to mind when you're talking about all that stuff, and it's a beautiful word, and it's a simple word. It's not used very often, but I love the word goodness. Just goodness. If you're there as a cardinal invited to the Vatican City to be a part of this process of electing a new pope, wouldn't you only want? And I'm not being superficially judgmental, because this is a human trait which is easily to fall victim to, and that is that, yes, I know he's better than me at this job, but I really want this job. This would be amazing. I'm more qualified than he is, the cardinal from wherever. But goodness is such a I think if you could think of one word, or there's lots of words, of course, that describes the character of Jesus, but I think goodness covers pretty much everything. If you only ever practice goodness, you're not going to have to worry about the 10 Commandments, because they're all about goodness, every single one of them, because they're all about telling you not to do the opposite, which is something bad, something evil, something dishonest, something inappropriate, blah, blah, blah. Goodness, if you are a cardinal, and this is what always staggers me about people flying their banner, thinking that somehow if you fly the banner and say that you're a believer, that makes you a better person. And it really doesn't. Practicing goodness, and that is not a Christian virtue or trait, by the way. Goodness is a part of all people who are aware of what it is and choose to practice it. There are plenty of people in the world who are not people who are au fait with goodness, that in fact they're the opposite. They're nasty and they're evil, and that's humanity. That is the human race. That's why we have what we have, and there's a degree of sympathy for those people who are trying so hard on the other side to try and turn that around with good hearts and goodness in their hearts. And it's an uphill battle that from what I've seen of the human race thus far, I don't think we're capable of really being anything other than a bunch of people who are good and a bunch of people who are bad. There's nothing going to happen that's going to change all of that, except for that if it ever happens that Christ comes back. And anyway, we won't. That's way too deep this time of night on a Wednesday night. So we'll go back to Jeng. It's your show again, mate. Look, you. There's something about you. You're a loner in our discussions of late. So whatever it is you want to talk about, we will talk about, because we have no one else. So does someone good comes along, mate. You're out of here. No, I'm joking. Love having you a part of it, mate. It's always really interesting discussion. Your latest comment is, I will say this about the Catholic Church. You'd better be hard pressed to get better K-12 education under the tutelage of an old school Catholic. God, mate, someone my age, oh my God, we have stories. My mother was brought up in a Catholic nunnery, as they used to call them back in the day, back in a place called Kalgoorlie, which is fundamentally a mining for gold town in the kind of what would be the southwest kind of heading. Yeah. Anyway, in a lower part of Western Australia, mining, and then she talks about the nuns, and I can't recall hearing too many good stories about nuns.
Yeah,
I don't know why, whether they were my microphone just went off.
I thought you.
And they were jealous or something like that, but they just always seem so nasty.
Well, for
every story I've heard.
I mean, for a religion.
I can't hear you, Luke. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. I've just done this thing, which it does occasionally, where you can hear me and I can't hear you, and I don't know why it keeps doing it. I was hoping, because we've been off. Just let me check. I don't know what it's doing. See, everything there is working. Damn! If I disappear for a sec, mate, I'll be straight back.
Okay. We need like hold music that just plays whenever Rowie disappears. Hopefully you guys can hear me. And it's just Rowie. Jen, so were you under the tutelage of an old school Catholic nun? They seem to be less and less. It doesn't really happen too much these days. Yeah, the actual education by the nuns, but it was big. It used to be huge. Although pretty brutal from what I understand in some cases. You can? Okay, excellent. Oh, that's good. It's just Rowie. It's always Rowie's a problem. This is what I've learned. He's got to get his tech sorted. Ah, okay. So you've heard some stories then, your old boss. That's what I was going to say to Rowie, is that for a religion of non-violence, following someone who is a God who is non-violent, seems to be a lot of violence that came in that sort of way of educating. A lot of rulers. Yeah, I went to a Catholic primary school, but it wasn't run by nuns. It was run by teachers. This is in the 90s. And I think it must have been the tail end before physical violence was outlawed. I remember getting smacked by a couple of the teachers. Certainly wasn't the rulers or any of that sort of stuff that was broken, but certainly physical contact, which sounds wild. You just wouldn't happen these days. Yeah, rulers on the knuckles. Actually, I might have got that. I think I did get that. I remember being smacked on the backside. I was probably a little shit that deserved it, but yeah, can't do it these days. In fact, if it happened, it would just be a huge controversy. I don't know when that happened because it wasn't that old. You got paddles. Jeez. The creativeness of how to discipline kids. Paddles. Yeah, that's worse than hands. That's got some weight behind it. Oh. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty wild. Paddles. So it was all through America as well. Yeah, it's a good thing. It's a good thing it's outlawed. I guess even in parenting now, yeah, it's outlawed as well. Not really outlawed, but it seems to be less and less physical. I think because they've just proven that it's sort of ineffective. Not only is it sort of mean, but it's just doesn't really work. It sort of creates fear, which for me makes sense because if God's non-violent, why would you?
Can't hear.
Have you got me, Peter? No. I'll leave and come back.
Hello, 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 hello.
Can you hear me now?
I don't know if you can hear me, Luke. Can you hear me? Oh, don't tell me not this again. I don't know what's going on.
I can hear you.
What is? Man.
That's so weird.
I got you now. Yeah, I can now. Yeah.
Excellent.
Wow. It's like all the settings are all the same. It just disappears. And I reboot, comes back to the same settings. It doesn't work. I change the settings from the normal and it starts working again. So
did you pray about it?
So I did. I cast out demons like you would not believe.
And look what happened.
Yeah, I went to the toilet. I mean, it was...
It's okay. Me and Jeff were talking. We were chatting.
Sorry to leave you. Were you saying anything worth repeating or not?
No, I'm pretty rubbish. I was just talking with Jenk. We're talking about because I was saying that for a way of non-violence, which is the way of Jesus, the way of God. That's the big revelation in the Christian faith, is that God's non-violent. Yeah, there's a lot of violence in Christian education back in the day. Every story I hear of an old school Catholic nun is they were brutal, and it's quite ironic. But I was telling Jenk that I was at primary school in the 90s, and it was a Catholic primary school, but it wasn't run by nuns; it was just teachers. And I remember in year 4, year 5, getting belted by teachers, like with smacked on the backside and rules on the knuckles a couple of times. But it's at some point between then and now, and it wasn't that long ago, really. It's sort of outlawed. If that happened today, there would just be it'd be outrage. It would
yeah.
be huge, and so it should. But
Yeah.
it's quite interesting. And I guess I came in at the tail end of that. So when it was in its prime, well before my time, school must have been a pretty scary place for a kid who coloured outside the lines, you know?
Well, look, it wasn't. We're talking about this with our kids, which are around about 40, 30, 28, and 3 kids. And my father was the headmaster of every primary school I ever went to. So
wow.
I had quite a different relationship with everyone. Like, no one messed with me for obvious reasons. Because they weren't going to get away with it because my father was the headmaster. So I could quite easily have acted like a kingpin, but I never did. I wasn't like that. It was inferred that no one kind of messed with me, although I never really recognized it because that's all I ever knew. And I thought I was just really nice and everyone liked me, but I think they were just shit scared of me, to be honest, because of who I was. So I was always, focus of my father, who was the headmaster all the way through primary school. And then when I went to high school, the very first thing I did was started acting like a little shit because my father wasn't there to lord over me. So I was just an absolute terror. Like in grade 7, so the equivalent, Jank, that would be the last year of primary school before you move into high school. And I know you don't use that.
They got middle school.
Yeah,
I think year 7 is probably the start of middle school, maybe.
Yeah, right. So I was head of the class. I was head of everything, and my dad bought me this fantastic Stingray push bike with the gears and the sissy bar and the big ape hanger. Oh, it was just like, mate. And my way of rewarding him for being so generous to me was to turn into a little shit. So back in those days, we still had the cane, which was that bamboo thing over the knuckles, open hand, bang across the top. I had 35 of those in one term. So in every school, obviously there was 3 terms throughout the year. I had 35 in one term. And I didn't care. I was such just a little shit to my father.
Did it hurt?
Oh God, yeah, it hurt. So I found a way of getting away with it. I got a lead pencil. I'd be sent up to the office for being like we used to smoke in the class inside the desks and that, smoking cigarettes and stuff. And we had this really, God, I feel so sorry for this poor man. He was a real weak man and he couldn't stand up to us. So I used to get a lead pencil when he sent me out of the room, go and see the headmaster, whatever, I can't remember who it was now. And I'd get a lead pencil and run it across my fingers really hard. So not only did it look like bruising because of the lead color from the pencil, but it also was red. So I'd do that, hang around for a few minutes, walk back into the class, and you had to show your hands to the teacher to see whether or not you had been caned. and you'd show them and go and sit down, and you didn't actually be there. And then the word must have got around between the teachers and the headmaster. I did that, and he came back in, and he licked his thumb and got my hand and rubbed it, and the lead came off, and he realized what I'd been doing. So the first thing they did was sent me back up to the office to get triple the
get through, yeah.
I was getting before. And my father was then called down to the school, and it would have broken his heart. And I never talked about it with him. I never apologized and never said, I'm so sorry. It would have broken his heart to see his son do that as a student in high school. Thankfully, the next year we chuffed off way up north, up to Dampier, and he was headmaster of Dampier Primary School, and I was in high school, and it was very different kettle of fish there. I was a different.
He might have been impressed with your ingenuity. That's pretty. It's a pretty clever.
Yeah, no, they don't know my father very well. He was a very, very, very straight, very, very straight, strict man. And so talking about the violence, back there. Actually, the worst moment was he actually caned me himself.
Really?
Yeah, he had to. He had to make a stand because I was being a little bit of a shit in primary school, and he had to make a statement and a stand, and he did. He caned me in front of the whole school.
Really?
Yeah, that wasn't a very nice moment, but
Mate, did you carry some trauma from that? That's pretty heavy.
yeah, I've just
Like, there's a reason they don't do it anymore. Yeah, we've kind of progressed.
Correct. I've been seeing a trauma counsellor for months about lots of other things that not necessarily that.
Yeah.
But if any kid goes back, anyone my age goes back in time, it's not hard to find incredibly traumatic experiences, which thankfully, I mean, you get someone like yourself, and your family dynamic as parents, which is pretty much the antithesis of what I grew up with, open love, encouragement, and fairness and openness, and I was wrong, and all of those kind of things you say that no one ever said to your kids when back then. It's so different than what it was, and there was an incredible amount of trauma. Growing up in the 50s and 60s in Australia was like zero comparison to what it's like now. It's extraordinary. And it's improved in so many ways, particularly with kids in school and being violated by being whacked and stuff. I had this horrible teacher when I was in grade 4, maybe 5, who had this triangle wooden shaped ruler. It's a solid block, a triangle shaped block of ruler, 12-inch ruler. And he'd sneak up behind you if you weren't paying attention and just crack you over the knuckles with this. If I did that to you now, I would break your fingers and you would be screaming in agony. But he used to do that to us, and no one ever did anything about it. It was completely acceptable.
Wow.
Or he'd throw a duster. Now, for Jenk and other people who might be listening from somewhere else in the world, we all had blackboards and chalk, and you had the same thing, no doubt, a duster, which is a block of wood with material on one side, and it wiped away all the dust, the white off the blackboard. We call them dusters. They're heavy, they're big. He used to throw them at our heads in class. And if you didn't dodge and duck and get out the way,
jeez,
you got whacked. I would love to find this prick. I really would. And go back and say, remember me? Okay, I wasn't the best behaved, but I wasn't worthy of being whacked over the knuckles and have my fingers broken just about and have dusters thrown at me. And he knew my father was the headmaster. And he knew I had no power to do anything about it.
It's that old thing, hurt people, right? So you can imagine someone who would probably abuse themselves or just needed to be on a power trip, finding themselves in that position where they can just inflict pain at will under the guise of education. It's you can, similar to what we were talking about earlier with pedophiles, how they'll find an occupation where it's a similar sort of thing, right? It's like, I feel like I don't have any control, so therefore I'm going to become a teacher so I can belt young Pete Rowe over the head with a bloody chalkboard duster. It's like,
seriously. Anyway, he's no doubt old and probably not even with us. Jen, going back, he was saying I can hear you fine. Oh, boss.
this was my chat with him.
Yeah, rulers on the knuckles. Oh, yeah. It's a ripper, isn't it? Good stuff. It hurts. We got paddles. The old paddle. That's across your backside, isn't it? Growing up. Yeah, physical discipline is ineffective according to several studies. Absolutely, it is. Completely. Cent'anni, what is that?
I think it means 100 years. It's Italian.
I figured it was Italian. Yeah, okay.
To live a long life.
It's kind of fun to see how perfectly acceptable things then are considered horrific now. Yeah, I wonder what the next thing will become taboo. My hope is that it is factory farming. totally with you, mate. I agree. I have a strong opinion and a real anti-factory farming. Look, it's just a part of the whole way the world is going. And if you reckon it's freaky for you or makes you angry, I was born in 1957. Everything I see now is the complete opposite to anything I ever experienced as a young kid. You know, being not forced into, but into discovering the technological age. And I don't mean TVs and typewriters and stuff like that, but the real technology, the real, you know, with Photoshop and computers designed to be able to do incredible things. And of course, then the connection with the internet and stuff. That's something we all had to learn. There was nothing like that. Zero. There was nothing digital, electronic whatsoever when I was a kid.
Electricity must have been a wild thing when that came around when you were a kid.
Oh, a lot of places we didn't have electricity. Don't be a smart ass. It's true. It's actually. Well, we had
the light bulb must have been wild, mate.
Yeah. And the wheel. We have fun with that sucker. But we had a phone, you know, the old one on the wall that you'd
we did
bring
too.
around. It's a little handpiece,
handpiece.
And that would ring. Yeah.
You actually had that.
Yeah, that's what we had in our house in Broome. That was the phone. So that connected you with a what were they called?
The operator.
The operator. And they'd say, "Could you put me through to 174, please, Mrs. Jones or whatever?" And they would pull the thing out of the plug and stick it in and connect you.
That's wild.
So there was no such thing as air conditioning, not houses or cars. Cars didn't have it yet. We would go out all day in Broome where there were snakes everywhere. There were sharks in the ocean. There were snakes in the mangrove swamps along the ocean. There we had no hats on. We wore no sunscreen. We didn't take water with us. And I was like 7.
And you survived.
Well, that's debatable. Look at me. I mean, but I mean, that's
different world, though.
Incredible to think that you imagine doing that with your kids now. Your 6-year-old go and play in the mangrove swamps where there's snakes, or the tide would go out, and you'd be able to walk out on the tide, and you could see the Japanese fighters over there that attacked Broome back in the 40s, and still out there, and you could see them. And there's these channels where these sharks would be swimming along, and you're just walking through the mud. What were we doing there? Who the hell lets their kids go in that? Well, my parents trying to get rid of us or something.
And those tides, those king tides up north, they come in real quick, and people don't realize we're talking 15, 20 meters. Like will go. Yeah, it's dry, and then next thing you know, so you'd see. I remember I grew up in Derby, and we would see boats hanging from the jetty, and the jetty's like huge. You know, we're talking 20 meters tall, and the boats are hanging there because you tie them up when the tide's in, and they're floating. And next thing you know, you're walking along there. So I know what you mean. I would never let my kids anywhere near that.
I wouldn't go there now as an adult. They're incredibly dangerous. The tides in Broome, and there's only a few places in the world where tides go out that far. One of them is Derby. Obviously, one is Broome. There's other places around the world. I don't know where they are. But it would go out beyond where you could see. There was just no water for miles. You couldn't see a single solitary thing. And we were never told, watch out, because they come back in
the middle of the ocean on a flat bed, but you don't realize it. Dry, it's like a salt flat, and then next thing you know,
I was just assuming I had the power to just part the whole waves. I thought this story is real. You know, I parted the Red Sea with my hand, but it was absolutely bizarre, and it just
chuck some saltwater crocs in there.
Sorry.
Chuck some saltwater crocs in there, and
I never saw any. Oh, there's crocs there, but I never saw any. There's more crocs on the beaches up in Broome now than there was back then in Cable Beach.
Yeah.
You go down there for a bite and see what happens.
Get one.
Fun fact, the first boxing match Rowie ever saw was Cain versus Abel. Oh, please stop it. Oh, you're cracking me up. You're so funny. Gee, that's original.
Brilliant.
Then you know what the next fight you're going to see is going to be? That's right. A young, smart-ass American boy taking on a tough Aussie bloke who used to do real boxing.
I like that. That's good.
Dear. Yeah. Okay. Well done. I'll give you that one. I'll give you that one for free.
I like what Jenks said about the factory farming, though. You know, we're the same, and I know you are as well. But even dog racing, horse racing, it's just you'd hope that one day it's just you look back and you go, "What were we doing? You know, that was horrible. You know, these animals deserve better."
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're making very, very slow process. There's only a few places in the world now that have, which are still they're pretty rampant in Spain as far as bullfighting goes, and the hideous chasing of the bull, or the bulls chasing
the running of the bulls in Pamplona.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It sounds probably a bit nasty. I don't know about you, but I cheer the bulls. If you're
bulls
stupid
tend
enough,
to win.
yeah, you run in front of a bull. I hope it bloody well hurts. I really do.
A lot of people are gored.
Oh, yeah.
But what do they do with the bulls at the end of that? Do they hurt them?
No idea. No idea. I guess if they're useful.
Tash reckons they kill them. My wife. I don't know.
Oh, she's just standing off to the sides there, is she? She just.
Yeah, she's just lurking in the shadows always. I just turn around. She's just leering at me in the shadows. It's like stalking, but you can't. Cops won't do anything because they're like, well, you married her. She's not really stalking you. So, but it's all right. I don't mind it.
Yeah. You don't mind?
Yeah. She just, it's like a director's commentary in the background running.
Is she there all the time when you're doing this every time?
No, this is the first time in about a year.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Now that I've exposed her, she'll probably never do it again.
No, I just thought it might be nice to hear some intelligent conversation for a change.
Yeah. It would be, actually.
Well, I'm not getting much from Jenk. It's got to be true. I mean, you know.
Jenk's a genius.
Jenk's a genius.
But yeah, the factory kills me. I hate when they say free range, and then you find out their version of free range is that there's 2 square meters of fact. Do you know what I mean? It's like they're not in cages, but there's still 6 million of them in this tiny shed. That's not free range.
Yeah, we don't buy any eggs that aren't. I think it's about. I can't remember the figures now, but it's the highest or the lowest amount of birds per meterage. So it's huge. But I mean, you know, Lou being a part of the RSPCA, I mean, we're Jenk RSPCA it's actually a worldwide. But I don't think they're in America. They're in the UK.
No, they are in America.
They are in America.
We ran into someone when we were over there who tried to get us to sign up to donate, and it was RS. It was something very, very similar.
Might have been ASP. Yeah,
ASPCA or something.
Yeah. In Australia, it's the oldest charity, as it were, in Australia and UK. The Royal
Society.
Royal Society Protection of Animals.
Yeah.
Or something like that. ASPCA. Which is the original was RSPCA in the UK and so that's who my wife works for, and so as you could well imagine, we're very I was anyway anti any kind of exploitation of animals, where it's greyhound racing or actually, is there still such a thing as greyhound racing in America, and what other sports exploiting animals have been banned, if any? I know there's still rodeos there, or rodeos, as I think you call them. They're still huge, as is horse racing, pretty much all around the world.
Yeah, global.
PETA is more popular. Yeah, they're very, not in Australia, they're not. No, actually, might be fairly even as far as RSPCA and
really?
and
I didn't even know
PETA.
PETA was in Australia.
Sorry?
I didn't even know PETA was in Australia.
Well, I don't know whether they're in Australia, but certainly from a
Branding,
branding and awareness online and stuff. Yeah, I think they're
PETA's a bit more radical. Yeah, they'll throw red paint on fur coats and that sort of stuff, aren't they? They're quite outspoken.
Yeah,
cool.
They do some pretty gross things. Greyhound and horses still happening. Pitbull dog fighting is still around. Can you?
Is it really?
That's
on the ground, I guess.
Wow. Yeah, it'd be.
Too. We just wouldn't know about it unless you roll in those circles. That's horrific. I can't think of anything worse than that.
Oh, it's disgusting. I mean, it is still around, albeit, the black market kind of side of things. There's plenty of that around in Australia that we don't want to know about. But yeah, that kind of dog fighting, I've never seen it. I've never heard of it actually being here. I'm sure it is. It's very underground, but probably not to the extent that it is in America. I mean, we are far more sophisticated in Australia than our American counterparts.
I feel like you'd have to be a certain person to even to watch something like that. You know what I mean? I feel like you have to be a sociopath or some sort. You'd have to have some sort of problem with empathy to be able to see a dog kill another dog, or even a chicken killing, like the cockfights and that. Yeah. To just have no but to be able to see that and see it as an opportunity to make money and have no concern for the animal that's just lost its life, in the most violent, painful, horrific way. I just kind of, it's bizarre to me. That's bizarre. I just think, and it feels like it's such a select amount of people who would participate in something like that. And yet it's an industry. So how many people like that are there? That's actually worrying.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. I totally understand. Look, the amount of things that have changed. I mean, when I was a kid growing up, because we were in country towns all my life, basically, Broomdood, Lacan, Pinjarra, Dampier, stuff like that. Everywhere you drove, because there's so many kangaroos in Australia, if I saw a kangaroo on the side of the road, it's just whatever. It's not even a thing. It's just a dead kangaroo, and you just drive past or whatever.
Yeah, keep going.
Now, if I see a dead kangaroo, I see a beautiful animal that's been hit violently by a car and has suffered and died, and it just breaks my heart. Whereas one time I couldn't have cared less. You were kind of, you get used to it. You become what's the word?
Desensitized.
Desensitized to it. And now any animal, any sentient being, really, I think is the parameters that I set for myself as a sentient being. It's painful to see the mistreatment. You see pictures of people in America sitting next to a massive, beautiful lion that they thought was a trophy for them.
That kills me. Ricky Gervais is an outspoken activist.
Oh yeah.
Sort of stuff. Yep. And he tears them to pieces, and I love it.
Yep.
Because I can't understand that. I would never go hunting, and I don't want to. I'm sure they're Americans, and I don't begrudge them. It's a cultural type thing, but at the same time, I personally couldn't do it. But I think there's, if you're shooting rabbits, is one thing. If you're going to go shoot a giraffe or a rhino, and just like, what is this about? This is insane.
Well, on so many levels, apart from the fact that there's not a...
It's like you haven't wrestled a gorilla to the ground and defeated it with your muscular prowess. You hid 100 meters away with a 50 caliber rifle and shot this thing unawares. Well done. Do you know, how impressive is that? That's just an
I
assassin.
mean, that's psychopathic, isn't it? Those people are the kind of people who would be willing to do something to a human being that would repulse most people, because it's not like it's a rabbit. I mean, even though rabbits are, animals with the rights, for something like a gorilla, which is so human-like, it's, I don't understand. I don't get it at all. It's sickening. Hello, we got somebody else. Come on board.
He made a good point, and I thought about it as soon as I said it. We said, why does a giraffe have more value than a rabbit? Yeah, absolutely spot on, Kyle. I agree.
Well, it doesn't, other than that there is a limit on how many giraffes there are alive in the world. There aren't a limit on rabbits.
Yeah, I guess that's more what I was thinking. I personally wouldn't shoot a rabbit either, but
No.
mate, I'd take that on board. You called me out, and I needed it, because it doesn't have any more value than a rabbit. I guess hunting full stop, I think, should not be a thing. And if there's if there's animals that need to be euthanized for pest control reasons or whatnot, it shouldn't be done in a sporting way or with joy. So you're taking a life. Yeah, no, fair call, Kyle. I'll take that on board. It doesn't.
Well, just expanding that a little bit, Kyle, on that comment, why does a giraffe have more value than a rabbit? I'm with Luke. I don't. Well, it doesn't. It doesn't on one level, but I think most people would find maybe for me it's purely the rarity. I mean, I've never seen a giraffe. I've never been close to a giraffe. I've shot rabbits and eaten them as a young person as a means of food. And I could not ever do that to a giraffe. So I understand what you're saying, that there is no difference from the animal cruelty aspect of it and the value of any live animal, but there is a difference in our upbringing and what we've seen and what we accept and what we expect, that a giraffe does appear to have more value than a rabbit. Technically, no, it doesn't, but you'd understand the difference. What's your opinion on what has? I mean, I take it from that question that you think that that a giraffe isn't any more important than a rabbit, which I totally respect. Just you got a comment in there is just preference. Yeah, that's right. And it's hard to defend or argue against it. As Luke said, I would no more shoot a rabbit than I would a giraffe. I used to. I don't even go fishing now. I used to love fishing. I've fished all my life as a kid, until I realized that, the lie was, fish aren't wriggling around because they're in pain. They don't feel pain. I went, that's so not true. Why are fish void of feeling pain? So, I mean, people will laugh at it and go, whatever, mate, I don't care what anyone else thinks. I don't fish anymore because I the same as I wouldn't go into a jungle and kill an animal for food or not. Now, do I eat fish? Yes. And this is the hypocrisy that we live with as human beings, that I won't kill a fish, but I will eat a fish that somebody else has killed. And I understand the stupidity of that. I totally admit that I cannot stand the thought of animals being killed. Am I vegetarian? No. I have been vegetarian in the past, but at the moment I'm quite open and quite honest to say I am a hypocrite, and I'm too lazy to spend time. But having said that, we eat very little meat because I love vegetarian food. I really do. But I'm not prepared. Well, see, the argument's similar too. I don't create my own vegetables. I pay somebody else to do it for me. I think that's the human part of us, which is a part of our failing, I think.
It's hard to live in this world and not participate in it to that degree. To disagree with, so you can disagree with farm, which I do, the farm factories and whatnot, and you do your best, but you end up still buying eggs because unless you've got a property where you can have free range chickens and get the eggs, you kind of, or you give up eggs. So you do the best that you can. But it's hard. There's always an element of hypocrisy. And we've wrestled with the thing with meat as well. Yeah, you have to numb yourself and not think about how has this beef become what I'm about to eat, and you just have to not think about it. But there's hypocrisy in that as well. And that's why Cole's calling it out. I think that's absolutely true. I mean, the whole giraffe with the rabbit, I think it's more than just preference. Maybe it's because maybe the reason that popped into my head was because it seems more offensive to me because I think there's less giraffes, or they seem like a rarer creature to me. I live in Africa. Maybe there's lots of them there. And whereas rabbits seem like they are prolific, And so, but that doesn't change the value of the rabbit's life. But maybe it's easier to make that comparison on the fly. But that's why it's good that there's a voice to actually call you back to that and be like, well, really, life's a life. It doesn't have more value.
It's also different for us in Australia.
More value to like a white rhino who is on extinction, or even so there is something. I don't know. It is something. But then for me, a deer is rare. We don't see deer, and yet there are parts of America where they are everywhere, and they've never seen a kangaroo, and we see them everywhere. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like I guess it's a personal perception, but that doesn't affect the worth or the value.
No, it doesn't. And that's an interesting comparison between a giraffe and a rabbit, one which we have in Australia in abundance and one we don't. Plus, when I was growing up, rabbits were pretty much considered vermin. In fact, there was a poison created called myxomatosis, where the farmers would have their crops ruined because of just a plethora of rabbits. So they used to bait all around the place, and the rabbits would eat the bait with the myxomatosis, and it would kill them. So I grew up thinking they were just vermin and they were anti-farming, and farmers hate them. They'd shoot them or poison them or whatever. So to me, the value of a rabbit was diminished somewhat. Now, if you see a beautiful cuddly rabbit now in a home or somewhere, it's totally different. They're seen as a beautiful creature. But yeah, the comparison is quite ironic between a beautiful, elegant, rare, stunning animal that we have none of in Australia. Although having said that, we actually have a giraffe in our zoo here in Perth, which I have seen.
That giraffe and its baby created perhaps the most famous photo of a giraffe and a baby. That kiss.
Kiss it, yeah.
That was a Perth zoo. That's the most famous in the world.
Yeah, beautiful. But I've not seen them in the wild. We actually had a trip almost planned to go to Africa to check out the beautiful animals. And as a photographer, I mean, I'm hanging to get that classic shot of a leopard or a giraffe or whatever. So, but on the reality is that they are as valuable as each other. There is nothing more valuable than others, and to suggest that there is a whole new discussion about animals and life and the need and desire to live freely. But a lot of people don't apply that to human beings, let alone to animals. So we're battling the horrible side of human beings. It's almost like it's an exhaustive concept to try and work it out for animals as well, when we're so shit at being good human beings.
Yeah. Well, yes, good point.
The only saving grace when we talk about the behavior of human beings and how does one explain why You know, if we look at the fact that we were not that long ago, you know, in trees, and unfortunately, a lot of people have not evolved past some of the things that come natural to a chimpanzee, which we would see now being quite vile, and yet a lot of us still practice it. You know, it's but anyway, that's a whole nother discussion. Good to hear from you, Kyle. If you've got any other comments, mate, would love to hear what you have to think, and particularly what we were talking about. I don't know if you joined us some time ago, or whether you joined us, you know, about 20 minutes ago. But we were talking about, which may or may not interest you, of course, was the death of the Pope, and whether that sort of thing interests you from a global spectacle, or whether or not you're Catholic or stuff. I'd love to hear your comments and views on what we've been talking about. What else have we been talking about? Well, it's really been about the Jenk show tonight, as it was the last time we spoke, which was kind of cool. But we are talking about the Catholic Church, and are you a Christian? Are you an atheist? Are you a Catholic? We'd love to get some feedback from you. Anyone else out there? It is now 10 o'clock Australian Western Standard Time. It is a Wednesday for wherever you are listening. If you're in America, obviously it is not Wednesday, nor is it the 23rd of April, but it is here. I don't know how long we're going to go for. We kind of leave it a bit open. If people are talking to us and chatting and want to have a yarn, we'll stick with it. Otherwise, we will wrap it up at some stage. We do kick off 8 o'clock. It has been over a year a normal podcast, an atheist, a believer, and a pastor walk into a bar. Normally, well, it had 5 of us at one stage, hence the name.
It's a fluctuating.
At the moment, it's just me and him. That's it's what it's called. It's but we still crave to have discussion and talks about anything. Our subject matter is open-ended. It doesn't have necessarily. Sometimes we start off with a particular subject and we sort of discuss that. But from an atheist, I'm not a believer. Luke is, but we've managed to tame the savage beast from within those two belief systems to make it kind of coherent and respective of one another. Because you'll find that if you know people who don't believe and people who do believe, if you're intelligent and you're humble and gracious and honest, you'll find that the differences are minimal. Unless you're a prick, then it's different. But normally, good open-minded Christians, which are not easy to find, that's for sure, and adaptable, open, honest atheists are not overly easy to find either. And there are plenty of Facebook pages about atheists and Christians, and it's just a constant fight. And Twitch, the most famous, I guess, at the moment, and fame not being the right kind of word, but the most well-known is Eve was framed. She's on the news all the time, of course, being attacked by people for becoming an atheist, and it's a sad indictment on the narrow-mindedness of Americans when it comes to Christianity and the Bible and the whole bit. But
we got a few of them here too.
We definitely have very different
different culture.
Hey,
it's a bit of a different church culture, although our evangelical church here is heavily influenced by the church in America, and more so. You can see that with the support for Trump across Australian evangelicals, which blows my mind. And it's hard to fathom, but it's certainly there. So I think, if anything, it's increasing. It's getting closer to that level in America. But yeah, you're right. It is different. We've still got a ways to go, but it's hard.
We're all a bit nervous in Australia, I've got to tell you, when it comes to politics, because we've been watching closely Donald Trump and the very rapid demise of just about everything important in America, and how he is single-handedly destroying the culture, including the latest from what we've heard is getting rid of old mate It's the Telstra man. Tesla.
Do you get rid of him? Musk.
Yeah, he's seeing that the destruction of so many organizations and government and non-government groups as he has done. Trump is now realizing that that's a bad move, and it's going to help. It's not going to help him at all. It's going to make things worse. So there are rumblings that he's next to be gotten rid of, is Elon. So we'll see how that plays out. But we have a federal election, Australian election for our federal government coming up on the 3rd of May. And up until now, things have been fairly straightforward between the Labor Party and the Liberal Party with the coalition government, which is obviously the Nationals. But now the opposition to the man who's in power at the moment, a gentleman called Anthony Albanese, who's the Labor Prime Minister of this country, a guy called Peter Dutton, we call him the evil potato. He has just become a Trump clone.
Yeah,
and he's trying to take us down the same path, thinking that if he models what Trump did, then he will have the same success as Trump did. And that's very concerning for us. I think Australians are far different from Americans. I'd be totally shocked if Australian people would see Peter Dutton as another Trump, and if they do, whether they would accept that or whether they would just. I think he's in for a horrible shock. I hope it falls flat on his face. His policies are horrible, pretty much like most of Trump's, and they are not policies that will bring unity and good things to this country. So I hope we don't go down that path, but that's coming up. We'll keep our eyes on that. So a couple more comments. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, just on that, before I forget, don't underestimate the power of uniting people around a common enemy. That's all Trump has done from the start.
Oh, yeah.
People want an enemy. They want a reason for the reason the world is, the reason that they're not happy or they don't have this or that or they can't get a job or whatever. So Trump gives them the problem is immigrants.
Immigration, that's right.
The problem is this, the problem is that. And they rally around that. And Dutton, and that's not an exclusively an American thing. That's a human thing. That's happened since the dawn of time. René Girard talks a lot about that. This is the mimesis. This is the scapegoating. We find an enemy that we scapegoat to get peace, but it's not a real peace. It's because they're not the real enemy. But Trump does that, and I think Dutton's trying to do the same thing. I hope it doesn't work, but I don't think it's an American problem. It's a human problem, and we've got a lot of humans in Australia. So the best thing though is that we've seen the disaster that's unfolded in America, and hopefully that then pops that illusion that it will work out well. Because I agree with everything you're saying. I just hope that everyone else can see that as well,
Yep, certainly hope so. Sorry, that was another question. Is just preference from Kyle. Are you guys atheists? You might have just missed. I was a Christian for 25 years, Kyle, up until about, 12, 13 years ago. Started being a Christian around about 1987, I think it was. Full-on Christian for 25 years, and then quickly started to realize, with what I believe anyway, which I think, it's basically man-made with zero evidence, and it's all made up in our minds, in our imagination, as a matter of need. So no, I actually don't call myself an atheist, simply because I think it's silly to identify yourself as something that you're not. I don't call myself an Santarist or whatever you'd like to call it, or an leprechaunist or whatever. I don't. It just makes no sense. I don't want to identify myself and have a label as anything. I'm just a person who doesn't believe anymore. I did, and I don't. I'm happy to talk about it if you're interested, but no. And Luke is definitely a believer, as I was, which I think is part of the glue that holds us together. Is that it's quite unique in the sense that I can completely understand and rationalize with stuff that Luke is talking about, because I've been there. 25 years is a hell of a long time to be committed to something when you consider the age of how long we live for. I wish I hadn't spent that much time doing that, but by the same token, I wouldn't be who I was now had I not gone down that path. So no, in answer to your question, I don't call myself an atheist, but in if that's what you want to call me, it's fine. I don't have a problem with that at all. Rowie is a former Christian. Luke is a progressive Christian. There you go. That kind of wraps it all up. Thanks, Jenk, for answering that. And Kyle said, thanks, Jenk. NP?
No problem.
No problem. Oh, God, I hate freaking millennials and whatever they are with their...
It's just efficient.
No, well, it's not if you have to ask what it stands for. Don't be so lazy.
It's efficient if you don't.
NP. Look, it is. It's absolutely fine, and it is a hell of a lot quicker than writing no problem. Acronyms are great, but not if you don't know what it means. And because it's so rare to see it, in half an hour's time, I'm thinking he's done it again. What does NP stand for?
Look at Kyle's latest comment.
Hang on, your activity searching for truth.
No, the next one.
Oh, the next one. Oh, sorry. Shut up. Jesus.
That's laugh out loud. Just kidding.
I know exactly what that is. That's okay. That's a yeah. Anyway, there's a lot more the world's got to thank for boomers than your generation, my friend. I'll give you the big tip. So,
but what the previous comment was it? You're actively searching for truth.
You said meant to be actively,
maybe
searching for truth. Well, either way, it's still got a big bug flying in front of me. No,
well, you are.
Well, I can't define if there is a truth. If what is the truth that everyone's seeking?
Well, I mean, the truth that you're seeking, I think, is it's only truth if it's defined by
truth of what?
Evidence, right? So yeah, you're seeking for a truth that's verifiable by evidence.
Don't tell me what I'm seeking.
But you've said that. You said, like, you know, if God's real, I need evidence.
Yeah, but I've changed my mind tonight.
Fair enough.
No, in all seriousness, just that sentence, that question, actively searching for truth, it does make me ask the question, the truth of what? Like, is there a one single global truth that is the same truth that everyone is searching for, that some people claim they have found and others claim that they haven't? If there's a truth that everyone's searching, what is the lie? What isn't the truth? And how do you define what is truth and what is not truth? I thought I had the truth. I was convinced that I found the truth in God, and that still may have been real.
But there's got to be an objective truth.
Well, why? Who says there has to be an objective truth? For what purpose? You think about it,
the world is round, but for many, 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 many years, we didn't think it was. But there was a search to understand it, and eventually, someone figures out it's round. You know, I think it was Galileo says this is my theory, and it was the truth, because the world is the earth is round. It's like, despite a strange resurgence of people pontificating otherwise, it's not flat, it is round, and so that's an objective truth of that. And I think the same thing with God. Like, if God either exists or God doesn't, this is either one big scientific accident.
That's not a question for me, though, because clearly there is no God for me. I think the reality is that God at the moment only exists in people's minds, because there is no evidence for there being a truth regarding a deity of any description. Then the only truth that we have is inside our imagination, which has convinced us that I do believe this because I want to believe this. If it was something you didn't want to believe, it's easy not to believe that there's a hell, because hell isn't nice. So it's easy to go, well, of course I don't believe in hell. Hell is easy to not believe in. There's no proof for that either. But when it comes to nice things, good things, God things, we want it to be true. So we convince ourselves, as our minds can convince ourselves of anything. We can be sick with our minds. We can be healthy with our minds. Our minds are the be-all and end-all of all of this. So the only thing you can prove 100% is true is that outside of my mind, in my brain, I cannot show you or prove to you that God exists. It can only be at this stage my imagination and my desire to choose to believe that there is such a thing as a God. I have no proof. I can't show you anything. I can't convince you of anything. I can only do it because I want it to be true. Belief in belief is stronger than a belief in God. If you want to believe in belief, you will. I did. And when I decided to not believe in belief because I didn't feel I needed it anymore, the feeling that there was a God, it disappeared instantly.
But if God exists, obviously I believe God exists, and obviously you don't.
Yep.
But if say it's right, say I'm correct, say God does exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's an objective truth. And so say God doesn't exist, say you're correct, right? That's an objective truth. If that is the case, that would, and so for me, my fervent belief that there is a God doesn't make that true, even though I feel it's true. If God absolutely does not exist, objectively, that is not true, what I believe, no matter how fervently I believe it, and vice versa. So it's like there has to be some criteria that there is an objective truth. Like there is an up and there is a down. Do you know what I mean? There is a right or a wrong. It cannot be subjective. God can't be subjective in the sense that if you want to believe in God, God exists, and if he doesn't, that's like Schrodinger's cat. It's like you both the cat is alive and the cat is dead simultaneously. That's obviously a pretty brute version of that philosophical concept. But I think when it comes to God, like there has to be a truth. Now I might be right, but I might be wrong, and vice versa. And it's funny what you're saying about the hell thing. And you said it's easy to not believe in the bad stuff and only want to believe in the good. But for me, I don't believe in a hell of eternal conscious torment. But that took me such a long time. In fact, it was far more difficult for me to believe that because of the environment that I was in, where overwhelmingly the majority of the Christians that I was around believed that fervently, that there is a hell of eternal conscious torment. So for that to be such a pervasive belief, when nobody should want that, nobody should ever wish that to be something, and yet it's there. That's something weird, right? That's not just, there is something beyond that, I think.
I think to believe in a hell is a naive stupidity and gullibility beyond comprehension. because there is absolutely nothing other than proof that it was a fear-based what's the word I'm looking for? Concept or idea that solved no other problem other than scaring the shit out of people and terrorizing children, thinking that they could go to hell. So that's easy to dismiss of in certain ways. As a Christian of 25 years, with that drummed into me, I still have fears when I die. Could that possibly be real? That's
But you imagine being back when you were in the thick of it as a Christian, right, in your congregation and dealing in those and moving in those circles. Imagine you're reading the Bible and you're wrestling with it, and you come to the conclusion that actually I don't think a God of love would eternally torment someone eternally and consciously for whatever reason. Like this thing is incompatible with the God of love, so therefore it can't exist. And then you think about the congregation that you were in, all the people you know, the theology around that. That wouldn't be an easy thing to come out and say, actually, this is now my position. You would actually be dragged over the coals for that. People aren't going to go, good on you. They're going to go, no, you're wrong. Yeah. Hell has to exist, because for us to be in, some people have to be out. And give all sorts of reasons for that, which
but that's because those people feel comfort in thinking that they're obeying God. They're thinking that the idea of hell is from God. Therefore, if I obey it and believe it, then that just takes me just one step closer to God, because I'm being like Him. But the killer to that, Luke, is that if you think that God couldn't be God because God is love, and then you just go and read the Old Testament and go, bullshit. That God, this is not a God of love. This is a horrendous, horrible monster.
Yeah.
And we don't need to go through all of the Leviticus. We don't need to go through all of just because it's. I'm not going to be a sucker and say this was just the Old Testament. Don't worry about that. That was God then. And then He decided to be a nice God in the New Testament and stays a nice God.
You can't. That the whole thing falls apart if God's changing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
100%.
So why couldn't He have created hell? If He's the God of the Old Testament, and we must always remember that God has not said that this is what was in the Old Testament. This is a bunch of illiterate peasants have said, this is the God, look around you, look what's going on. This is God creating all of this. It's a bunch of psychopathic men writing for men, about men, to dominate women and everything else in the earth. And God is going, I actually didn't say any of this. You guys are just making this shit up. It doesn't matter. The church has decided that this is the book of truth, and it's been released, and it's the most read book in the world, and it's too late to turn around and say, the Old Testament, don't worry about it. Don't just look at the New Testament. Just that's why they cut out the whole Old Testament with the Good News Bible. Like, let's get rid of that guy. That's not the one we want to sell now. That's too hard. We need to talk about the other God, and that's the big issue with all of this.
Well, there's a guy called Marcion that came along in the early centuries that said exactly that. Said, well, they're so far opposed, this God of the new and God of the old, that they were different. Yeah, they're different gods, and we need to get rid of this. And it's not the way to go about it. I mean, the only way you can do it, in my experience, is to be able to say, well, God is not accurately represented in a lot of places in the Old Testament. This is what people thought God was like, and it's recorded in there. So there are times when you look at it and you go, based on my understanding of the life of Jesus and Jesus representing God, this is obviously my position, then I can't imagine Jesus doing this. Therefore, this is not God. This is what man thought God was like in this instance. So what's this telling me? We don't need to get rid of this. This is just telling me more about the human condition than it's telling me about God. This is telling me more about us wanting to project ourselves onto the image of God rather than who God actually is. And so we learn about that. We say, well, we have a propensity for violence. We want to make God violent. And so how do we change that and learn from that today? So it's still valuable to be in there, but it's not telling me about who God actually is. The only thing that tells me about who God actually is the life of Jesus. That's the center point for me. That's the lens through which I read everything, the Old Testament and the New, and so I think that's how I approach that problem. That's how I approach that, because I agree with you. If you're taking that book as everything is literal in it, well, you're stuck.
Well, no, it doesn't have to be everything literal in it, but there's got to be some degree of truth. Otherwise, you must close that book and never open or read it again.
But that's what I said. There's truth. So there are some times when it's telling us the truth of who God is.
And who gets to make the decision, though, Luke? Who gets to make the decision what's true and what isn't?
Well, no one can make the decision of what's true.
You're making the decision for yourself.
Well,
you're deciding what part to believe and what not to believe.
Well, everyone has to through an interpretive lens, through a hermeneutic, right? So you need an objective thing that you say, this is how I'm going to interpret this book, right? That interpretive lens, it's a hermeneutic.
Not the way to find truth. It's not the way to find truth. It can't be the way to find truth, because it's open to so many different possibilities. It's either true or it's not. The sun either comes up or it doesn't. It's there every day. You can guarantee it. You can't guarantee any of the writings in the Bible, because you're forgiving the whole Old Testament by saying that was just men making all that stuff up and it's not right. But the other God's really cool.
No, it's not. And you're not getting rid of the Old Testament. You're seeing that this is what René Girard calls it, a text in travail, right? This is a text that is changing and growing and progressing, right? So it's like birth pangs, like labor pains in trying to, and then you get Christ. So for me, and again, I'm not the arbiter of truth. So I'm not saying that by me reading this becomes definitive truth. But for me to say this is a text I think is important, because I believe Jesus is who he says he was. And I believe that Jesus actually is fully representative of God the Father, which means that before that, we didn't know what God looked like. We thought we knew what God was like, but God looks a lot more like ourselves, our own violent tendencies, our own tendencies towards exclusion and towards power dynamics. And yet Jesus comes and he upends all of that. And then for me, the resurrection and Easter week is vindication of that, is God saying, actually, this was me. This was my son. This is what I am like. So I then have to go read through anything in the Old Testament, anything in the New Testament through the lens of that. Is this aligned with Jesus? Is this aligned with the non-violent Father that Jesus is representing? If not, then this story is telling me what we thought God was like, and it's telling us more about myself and humanity, right? But then there are some great moments throughout the Old Testament where God is like that, where he is reaching out to women, where he is doing unexpected things, where he is breaking down barriers and boundaries and saying to welcome the foreigner, and to, that everyone should have enough and no one have too much. All this sort of great equalizer, this beautiful picture that I see represented in Jesus. It's a hermeneutic of Jesus. So that is the constant that I read the Bible through, right? Someone's hermeneutic might be, this is the literal word of God. We see that a lot. But you run into all sorts of trouble with that, because the God that you're reading there is very different to the God that you're seeing in Jesus, and they cannot be the same. So which one do you pick? So you got to have
That's why I've always said the most simple way to do it without fault or problem or drama is just to don't read the Bible at all. Just worship Jesus. You know what he says. You know what he does. No matter how many times you read it, it doesn't change. We know what kind of a character he is. But for some unknown reason, that rather than just doing that, which is perfectly fine, to go back and try and make sense of the Bible, I think is just, it's a folly. It is just a folly. There are so many holes and so many arguments and contradictions and replacements, and it's a mess. And I don't see the need to read something which is so out of date and written by people who had no idea about what was going on. There's no benefit. It doesn't give you any more credibility to the character of Jesus. It's not helpful. I can understand that it's useful and it's interesting to you, but I think it should be something that you can't use as an argument to try and back up the character of Christ, which you already know. Doesn't add anything to Jesus whatsoever.
No, I agree. I don't use it to back up the character of Jesus, because Jesus' life and ministry stand on their own. And that's why I don't read the Bible flat. The Gospels for me are up here and they carry this amount of weight. And, the conquest narratives in Joshua will be down here. It's a different thing. But in saying that, understanding how we got to where we are is a very, very valuable tool. What's the quote? If we forget our history, we're doomed to repeat it. To be able to see this is a progressive understanding of who God is, because there's not a lot of difference between the God in the conquest narratives, who is a God who is against our enemies and is trying to destroy everyone who is against us, and the idea of Christian nationalism in the year 2025. We're still humans. We're still projecting our own crap onto our understanding of God and then labeling that as God. So for me, that's the value is, sure, that might not be telling me very much about what God is like, but it's telling me very much about what humans are like in a lot of these times. But the only way I can make that distinction that God isn't like that is if I read it through the lens of the life of Jesus. That's my hermeneutic. That's my constant. Would Jesus order that genocide? No, he wouldn't. Then I have to read that differently. And again, I'm not the arbiter of truth. So because I read it that way, that doesn't make it true, right? But it's the closest thing I've come to being able to make sense of it and being able to understand that this Bible is valuable and Jesus is actually who he says he is. And so, I follow Jesus, not the Bible. But I also don't think the Bible should be thrown away. But I also agree with you on what you're saying, that you don't need the Bible. I don't think you do. You just need love. If you love and you love genuinely, amen. Keep doing that. But it doesn't mean that it's not valuable.
No, the reality is the Bible's the last book you should read about encouraging love, as we know. And I didn't say throw away the Bible. I said close it, shut it up and don't read it. And certainly I wouldn't push other people toward reading it, because I don't think it's in any way, shape or form helpful to discover the only thing about it, which is Jesus and love. That's the message there, right there. And I think it's a shocking book to be able to use for anything, for ancient history, for right and wrong, good and bad, anything to do with cosmology. It's like,
well, it's not a science book or a reference book, and there are people that use it for that way. And you're right.
But it does talk about science, though. It does make statements about stars falling from the sky and how God created all of those heavens and earths and stuff. I mean, that's all scientific, and I understand it's not science per se, which is the endeavor to discover truth. A book like that and peasants like that shouldn't have been talking about that stuff that they knew nothing about. It didn't help their argument at all. It just gave opportunity for down the track for people to be able to say, okay, well, that was all wrong. You had no idea. You got it all wrong. It's I think an odd book of help is just.
But they weren't trying. I don't think they were trying to write that book. They never knew that it would become what it is. It's a collection, particularly in the Old Testament. It's a collection of stories of a particular tribe of the Israelites, and it was never designed to kind of go outside of that. It only it went beyond that because of what ended up happening with Jesus, and he was a Jew and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
But you can't blame them for example, they say God flooded the entire world. Well, that's based off a story that predated, well predated the Israelites. There was flood stories 1,500 years before that was ever written down. And But this is coming from a region, that Mesopotamian region, where they didn't know what the world was. They had no idea how they looked as far as they could see, and then as far as they could see, and that was the world. And there was likely a regional flood that was significant in that region because there were so many of these stories that originated, and it likely flooded that whole region. But for them, that's the world, right? So the story becomes a god flooded the whole world, or the gods flooded this world, right?
Yeah.
Now, in the 21st century, I mean, but for them, it wasn't poetic license. They just like, that was the world to them. This is, everything is gone. And yet we look at it back now and we go, there was no global flood. There's no evidence of a global flood. It never happened like that. But I can totally understand why in the year 2500 BC, someone thought that. So we just need to read it accordingly. And yet some people get hung up on that. And it's like they're trying to prove that the world was, they found Noah's Arks. It's like, that's not.
I mean, I talk about poetic license in reference to the story behind why God flooded.
Yes.
That's taken the piss big time.
That's right.
We need to get this a couple of. Can I just leave you for a second just to talk to a couple of the other comments that are coming through?
Yeah.
Can I do that? I'll be back in a sec.
Jank, you guys need to get a fervent. I can't click on these things and bring them up on the screen. I don't have the admin. Don't have the power to do it. You guys need to get fervent evangelical on the panel. That would be amazing. Like someone who is, really has a different view on it than what I do. I think that'd be really good. Be important. Kyle, are you saying there's no objective truth? I don't know. I think he might have been saying that, but then other times he doesn't. I don't think he was, but I'll let him answer that. Saying there is no objective truth, self-refuting statement. Yep, I agree. Is the abuse of an innocent person objectively wrong? Correct. If there is no God, then nothing is objectively right or wrong because we're just evolving bacteria. Yeah, I agree. I take that same position. I think there's got to be some sort of objective right or wrong. The ambiguity, if there is no God, comes into play. It means there is nothing really. I mean, you can be a good person and there not be a God, but there's nothing really governing that. So yeah, I understand that. Context, hermeneutics, yeah. Have to dive into church history, yeah, absolutely. I mean, context is such a massive one when it comes to reading the Bible. It's everything, because if we read it through the lens of the 21st century, if we read it through the lens of today, we're not reading it properly. You know, this is something that's been translated sometimes 2 or 3 times, maybe from Greek to Latin to English, from Hebrew to Greek, then to English. We need to understand there are things that happen there, and the context of what was going on at the time is critical to understanding what's happening. So, Paul's writing to a certain church. Well, what was going on in that church? What was he saying? What was going on in the Roman Empire at the time? What are things that he might have been speaking to that the audience is taking for granted, that he is not having to fully explain, because he knows that the people who are reading it, they can read between the lines. They already understand, and yet we don't. So we need to. It's whenever people say, "Well, I just read the Bible and it just tells me what it is." It's just, I just take whatever it says. So you actually can't do that, because the Bible, it's not saying anything. It's a bit of paper. It's a text. It's not saying anything. All it's saying is through interpretation. Interpretation is everything. So you got to be interpreting it the right way, because you can make this thing say whatever you want it to say. And we've seen that throughout history. And in church history, we've seen it with the Crusades. We've seen it with all sorts of stuff, slavery, exclusion of women, all sorts of things. You can distort this thing. And so it's important to kind of have something consistent. They weren't worried about writing it down because oral tradition was part of their culture. Most peasants were illiterate back then. Absolutely. Absolutely. So some of these stories, in fact, a lot of the stories that we're familiar with in Genesis and in others, Exodus, whatnot, they were, a lot of them were written sort of around the time of the Babylonian exile or after that, and so they're written down by elites, as you said. They're not the common folk who are writing this down. They're people who were equipped to be able to do that, but they're combining stories from the north and the south, who had been sort of enemies for a long, long time. And these are stories that had evolved over thousands and thousands of years in many cases. They were traditions, and they were oral traditions that were passed very meticulously to one another. And then eventually were written down and edited along the way, and then written down and edited after they were written down to get to the point where we are now. So it's it's an important thing. That doesn't make them wrong. It doesn't make it untrue. It just means that it's important to see, because what's in there is specific, and what was left out was specific as well.
Thanks, Luke. Sorry for chucking you in the deep end.
I love it. It was all up in my wheelhouse. We're just talking about different things.
Yeah, I just wanted to stop you before you started corrupting too many people around you.
It's wise, mate. I started to get the preacher hat back on.
I did, because I make sure I can still hear everything that's going on. And I did hear something that you said I was going to answer something from one of the other guys said, but I don't remember.
Yeah, so Richard was saying, it was more asking you when we're talking about a truth, an objective truth. So when back when it says, are you saying there's no objective truth? And he said, is the abuse of an innocent person objectively wrong? If there's no God, then nothing's objectively right or wrong, because we're just evolving bacteria. And saying that there's no objective truth is a self-refuting statement. And I just said that.
I never made the statement either that there was no objective truth. I didn't.
Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah.
No. I was just purely opening up to the whole idea and concept of the word truth, and breaking it down to try and discover what that actually means. Because when the problem with truth is that when you think you discover the truth and you're convinced that it's the truth that you've discovered, then when you find that wasn't the truth, then it becomes very difficult to understand what actually is truth, and you get to understand that it's a lot to do with interpretation. So truth is a word that can be very corrupted once you realize that what you thought was the truth may not be, or definitely isn't the truth. Then what was it before? If you were convinced it was the truth, and you can think that it's an objective truth, bang, I've got it. Then that truth disappears because you discovered that it wasn't the truth at all. What was it before, and how do you know what it's going to be next time when you try and find it? It's very complex and complicated, and it's not cut and dried by simply saying or asking the question, which was, are you saying there is no objective truth? No, I'm not saying there is no objective truth whatsoever. I'm trying to discover how it is that you know it is the truth. It's
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And when you've been through what I've been through, as being half of my life or quarter of my life as not believing at all, then becoming a full-on committed Christian who worked in ministry and all sorts of stuff, totally. And if you ever want to make a night of this podcast of me telling you my story and how I turned to God and why, it's amazing. It is incredible. It's quite freaky. It's bizarre. It's strange. It's full of stuff that I can't explain, that I don't know to this day what it was. And had I been a certain kind of person, I could be 100% convinced that it could only have been God. But I can't believe in something that isn't there for me. And I've said to God a million times, if you are real, I'm open. I'm there. If you are real and there is a God, bring it on. Why would I want to refute, the Hitchens and Sam Harris and people of this world paint God as being an absolute monster, and even to a lesser degree, well, maybe not lesser degree, old mate English, very well spoken English gentleman who Stephen Fry will say when he meets God that I have questions for you, and assuming that the only God that exists in his mind is the one that he's heard about in the Old Testament, and he's a monster and blah blah blah, and why would I want you anyway kind of attitude, which is as I said, very much the Hitchens Harris angle of atheism is I don't want you, even if I find out you're real, I just still don't want you, which is bizarre, because wouldn't you at least be open to the possibility that the God that you think you know about could actually be that beautiful, loving, caring God and heaven and the whole bit? And I've said to God, out of all the people that would know, out of all the things in existence that would know what would convince me that you are real, I'm open. I've asked you, show me. I know it sounds awfully like Anger Man, Texan. I can never remember his bloody name. Head of the Atheist Society in Texas. I can't think. With the stuff. Shit, I hate it when I can't think of his name. You guys know, it'll come up. One of you'll stick it up in a minute. It's gone. It's gone. But anyway, he's Matt Delahunty. God, I've bagged him so many times on the show. You think I'd be able to remember? He's the same kind of attitude, and he's asked God. He said often, out of all the people that would know what would convince me, you would be it. And he's seen nothing and heard nothing, and I'm in that same boat. So I'm most of us spend our lifetime on a journey trying to find out truths, or the rest of the population don't seem to give a stuff. There is no truths, they just go through life. But once you've discovered interesting things about life and the possibility of life and death and God and all the rest of it, it becomes very interesting. But that opens another whole door into really discovering what else is there. If you thought you had the truth and it's gone, then what else do you do other than say to God, show me, convince me, give me evidence, give me proof, give me something that I know is real, not what I thought was real before, not what I thought before was truth. I need something else. So I'm on a continuous journey, I'm not searching for the truth, because I'm not sure. And you're gonna object to this again. I'm not convinced there is an objective truth. I know that might sound strange, and it may even be strange, but for me, from where I'm at the moment, I can't see myself getting to a place going, right, got it, that's the truth. You guys tell me how you think you can discover what the truth is. Let me hear your ideas about how you discover what the truth is. What is that truth, and how are you convinced that it's real? Because I can't see a way around it. I can't see an ending to this movie.
I mean, for me, I think there's an objective truth that we probably cannot ever fully understand. I mean, the objective truth about God is not something that is discovered through interpretation. There would be things about God that I don't understand that I've got wrong. There would be things through my interpretation that I've got wrong. But that's not just me. That would be every single person who thinks they understand God. There would be elements. I think some would be much closer than others. I think my understanding would be closer than others. But again, that's my thoughts. That's why I've landed where I've landed. that doesn't necessarily mean that that's true, but that's just where I think I'm at. Of course, someone else would think that they're at, like a hardcore Reformed Calvinist would probably think that I'm so far away from the truth of God that it's not funny, and that they're much closer to it. So, but there might be things that they get that I don't, and that are closer, that, and there might be elements that I get, but none of us are fully true. But that doesn't negate the fact that there would be some objective truth, whether we can fully understand it or not. It's like we may never get to the bottom of quantum mechanics and how that works, but that doesn't mean that there isn't an objective truth of how this thing functions. But we may never understand it. Certainly we don't now. But that doesn't mean that there isn't something there that is true. We just lack the capacity to fully grasp it at the moment. So we do the best that we can. We make observations and we go, we think this is what's going on. And it's not scientific, but I think we do the same thing with theology. We'll read things, we'll have interpretation, we'll see God moving, we'll do different things, and we form an idea and we say, to the best of our capacity, I think this is what it's like, And that doesn't mean that we're correct, but it's the closest that we'll get. Now, I think if that leads to harmful behavior, then we've lost the mark. If that leads to behavior that is loving and inclusive and is good, then for me, if it leads to a belief that is rooted in love, and then actions that throw from that are loving, then that's okay. Then it doesn't bother me if we got the full understanding or not, as long as we're doing that. If it leads to harmful behavior, then I think you got to go back to the drawing board. You need to start to rethink something, because it's causing harm.
I don't think there's too much harm in that, and whether you know it to be truth or not is helpful. It certainly saved my life. But I think a good exercise is to actually talk to yourself, not you, I'm talking about for all of us, and actually ask yourself, what is a truth that I know is irrefutable, that's provable, that's empirical? What are the truths I know in my life that I can see and experience that I know are 100% truths? And when you go through that exercise and you eliminate the things that you do know, then you start drilling down on stuff like love. And how do you prove that love is even real? How do you describe? It's like trying to describe a blind person
the
what a banana really looks like, or something really complex and ethereal that isn't really that easy to put your hand on. You go, well, I think I know that is a truth. And the further you go along the line, I've discovered, is that the more difficult it is to be precise about that word truth, because what may seem a truth to you does not necessarily make it a truth. It just means it's truth to you. But then, as I mentioned before, is that I discovered what I thought was the ultimate truth, and that is knowledge in relationship to God, was not real and therefore wasn't true, and it disappeared. I'm just saw Kyle saying he's an Orthodox Christian. That's exciting to hear that, because we haven't had what he would call an Orthodox Christian, Kyle, and
love the Orthodox Church. Beautiful.
Well, I admire his text, because up until that point, I wasn't sure about where you were sitting on the belief fence, and who you really were, and also your where is it? Your armor and guy with all the garb on with the mobile phone in front. That's kind of a bit.
It's cool.
Left it is. It's a great graphic. But very confusing about where you are, and that's probably deliberate. But so explain yourself. What Orthodox church are you a part of? Is it traditional Orthodox?
Greek Orthodox.
Greek Orthodox, Russian, whatever. What part of Orthodox church are you involved with? That's interesting because they're many and varied, and I actually don't know anyone who's a part of an Orthodox church.
They have some beautiful theology out of the Greek Orthodox Church. Really, I resonate with a lot of it. I think it's beautiful. And Jenk asked me earlier in one of the comments, do I read biblical Hebrew or Korean?
Yeah, I was just reading that.
I wish I could say that I do, but I don't. I don't. I'm not fluent in either of them. I know bits, but nothing that I couldn't pick up something and start reading it. What I do know is I've got excellent resources that if I do need to do any sort of translation, that I can do that in a pretty in a way that I'm pretty confident that it's legitimate. Because there's a lot of stuff that are there that will help people try to understand things that they're very difficult, extremely difficult languages to interpret and to understand, particularly biblical Hebrew. You need a deep understanding to be able to do it. So without having that deep understanding, the best thing that I've got is having people that I'm connected to that do have that deep understanding, that teach it and all sorts of stuff. And also, obviously, resources. So whenever I do need to do any work around that sort of stuff, it's easy to Google a word, and you see this in messages and sermons all the time. And they say, this Hebrew word actually means this. It doesn't. It might in a certain context, but it doesn't in this context. But if you just go off Google, it's just going to give you all sorts of stuff. So they're more complex than people actually understand. So I'm very careful with it, very, very careful. But I don't read it. I wish I could say that I did.
Why do you ask? I'll just jump over to Kyle, but it was him. It was Jenk asked about whether you read biblical Hebrew. I'd like to know why you're asking that question. Why do you ask that question of Luke? I find that really interesting. And Kyle is saying, I'm technically still Catholic, but the church I'm planning on joining is, what's that word? Luke, do you know how to pronounce that?
Antiochian
Orthodox. Yep. What is that?
The Church of Antioch. It's very, very, very old church.
It was of Antioch, but what sort of,
So it'd just be a very, very old, quite a patristic church, like the early church fathers. It'd be, I can imagine beautiful theology, beautiful church, very, very old line of, from all the way back. The Orthodox Church. This was pre the split between the Catholic and the Orthodox and different stuff. So, it'd be a beautiful church. So Antiochian Orthodox, but I mean I don't know specifically about the Antiochian Orthodox Church, but I'm going to do some research on it.
So that's interesting, Kyle. Two questions. One is why. There's obviously something in that church that you're not perhaps connecting with as a Catholic, and also I'd like to know what you think about the loss of the Pope. Are you interested? Do you watch it? Are you be joining in to see who is going to be the new Pope or whatever? But interested. I'll read something about the Antiochian Orthodox as well to find out something about it myself. I've never even heard of such a thing. I mean, with my and if you understood my relationship with God and the whole bit, you would know why I don't. I'm not a churchy kind of person. My relationship with God was very human, and by that I mean it was very a sense of belonging and the connection from a heart position and from a love and for a need. It was very, not everyone's relationship with God is the same. Some people are born into it through family and stuff, but that wasn't the case for me. But I'd like to know a little bit more about that. And Cenk asking also, Luke, which biblical translation do you use? And again, Cenk saying, just curious, you seem pretty well learned in biblical studies. I just started learning biblical Hebrew myself. It's been quite enjoyable. That's interesting why you would do that. I was of the understanding that you are no longer a believer, Cenk.
But there's a lot of even secular studies in biblical.
Of course.
There's it's some incredibly rich literature.
It's just really interesting that everyone that we get that writes in and talks about this stuff, there's a very much on your sort of plane with Richard, and a great rich interest in, no pun intended, a rich interest in stuff like Hebrew and studies and theological discussions and stuff. Whereas for me, that's just all completely foreign. I'm not the slightest bit interested. It doesn't attract me at all to finding out about that, simply because, certainly from Cenk's perspective, if you've decided that's not something that you believe in, it'd be like joining a 4-wheel drive club and hating it, but going out and buying a 4-wheel drive anyway. For want of another.
I guess there's a really rich literature. So the Old Testament, I mean, the whole Bible, but particularly if you looked at the Old Testament there's a lot of scholars who are secular, who don't believe that this God exists, but they find it absolutely fascinating. And people don't realize the complexity in some of these stories and in some of these writings is absolutely genius. So there's a common misconception that a lot of these stories were written by uneducated peasants and it's like scribblings that because they're just these basic stories that we know scientifically don't line up in certain things. But when you actually look at the makeup, when the experts look at the makeup of these stories, they are layered, deeply layered. We're talking genius level composition in a lot of these stories. So it's endlessly fascinating. And and we see this with people that study Egyptian myths and hieroglyphics and whatnot. They don't believe in Osiris and these sort of things, but they will actually, they're still going to study it because it's a fascinating insight into human culture and anthropology in general. So, so just to answer this one, the biblical Hebrew is absolutely fascinating. It's an incredibly beautiful language. So keep learning. I'm learning as well, but it's a long burn, it's a slow burn, but it's incredible. You want to get a hold of a guy called Robert Alter, Alter. He does translations of the Old Testament and whatnot, and his whole thing is he is a scholar in biblical Hebrew. And you miss so much of the richness because once you translate that to English, you lose so much, because there are some things that anyone who speaks a foreign language, they realize that there are things that are untranslatable. You just can't. You make the best that you can to make it make sense, but it doesn't translate well, right? And so, but what Alter gets is he understands that there are things in the Hebrew that that is this beautiful wordplay and things that you don't get in the English translation. You just miss it completely. Even like talking about like Adam from the dust. It's like Adam ha-Adama, and it's like this. There's repeating this word of Adama. It's like, and it's you don't get that consonant, that wordplay, that repetition when it goes to English. And there's lots of examples of that. In terms of the biblical translation that I use the my primary one is the NRSV-UE, the newest one, the updated edition. So the New Revised Standard Version, updated edition, NRSVUE. I think that's the best balance of readability, but also scholarly accuracy. And it's reasonably progressive, which I think is important. I also like David Bentley Hart's translation of the New Testament. I think that's really, really good. And Robert Alters of the Old Testament.
What is this? This podcast turn into religious studies or something now, has it? What's going on?
It's taken over.
Just for our learned gentlemen here, Jink and Kyle. I started this podcast over a year ago, and my whole purpose of doing it was wanting to challenge people on proof of evidence that of the existence of God. Richard, who you may have seen before, is my nephew-in-law, and he's very much of the school and very close to Luke, sharing with many of the ideas and discussions about the Bible and God, and I never expected this to come about. I was hoping to get some people who don't believe, and the one non-believer I get is Jenk, who's going to doing freaking Bible studies and stuff, mate. Jenk, you're letting me down, brother. You were supposed to be on my team, and now I find the Christians and the atheists are all the freaking same. We're all studying Hebrew, and what is going on? This is not what this was meant to be.
And you wanted Rich and I to be those Christians that argue the fundamentalists, and then every time you brought something up, we'd both go, "Yeah, we agree with that." That's
I know. They're just bullshit, bullshit. You're just an atheist parading as a Christian, mate. Let's face it. But no, look, I admire and respect what you're talking about. It doesn't float my boat. It's not something I'm interested in all. I find there are far too many things in this world which benefit and help others, and without. I don't mean this as an insult, so please don't take it the wrong way. And I'm sure Luke won't. That I do find it awfully self-indulgent and does not benefit humanity in the slightest. It doesn't get us any closer to understanding whether or not there's a God or not. It doesn't unfold any evidence or proof that there is a God, and I find it. It's not like reading, having a lovely Saturday afternoon on the beach in Bali, reading a book, a fantasy book or science fiction or whatever. It's not the same as that. I find it, and I'm not saying I don't think you should do it, because it's none of my business. I just, for me, find it doesn't add anything, as in, I still admire the concept and the idea of Jesus, and you're never going to see Jesus sitting on a beach somewhere reading a book about stuff like this. That's not what it's about. And I find people have this brain where they need to be challenged and find it reading about different historical things to do with the Bible fascinating. And I get that. I understand. I don't get it myself. I don't do it, but I just find it like,
yeah.
There's so many great things you can do in the world that help humanity, and I don't think reading books about Hebrew and stuff. But that's just my opinion. It's not worth anything. It's not meant to be an insult. I'm sure you're not going to throw your books in the bin and say, Jesus, Rowie said he didn't like it. It's nothing to do with that. It's just my opinion about it.
Yeah.
And you know what happens when someone gives an opinion and you don't like it? Nothing. Nothing actually happens. You just ignore it and say, mate, shut up. I'm doing it. Good on you.
I just cry. I cry usually. Just.
Do you? Yeah.
Tears help. Because everyone
clearly Tash is not sitting next to you anymore.
She's gone. No, I wouldn't do that. No, she's long gone.
Yeah.
Gone.
In fact, years ago.
Yeah.
Jenks, still love you, Rowie.
Even if you're wrong. I love it.
I mean, I've got one of the things I've aimed to be in my life is to end up being true to myself. That is damn hard. Damn hard to be really, really true to yourself whilst not being a prick along the way. And while I don't understand what the fascination is from an intellectual point of view, I'm not a reader anyway. I find it very, very difficult to concentrate and read. I read a lot of stuff, but the thought of taking on a 400, 500, 600 page book or an ongoing study of books, to me, just is like, it's terrifying. It really is. It's a challenge I don't desire at all. I just find it so overwhelming. But that's just the kind of brain I have. Whereas my wife will the house could be burnt to the ground and she won't have even noticed because she's reading a book.
Yeah, I'm like that.
Yeah, I admire that. I wish I had that, and I've tried all my life. I think I've probably read 4 or 5 long books in my life, and it was exhausting, and it's so hard. But that's the way my brain is wired. So the way your brain is wired depends on so many things that we're talking about. You know, the ability to believe or understand or challenge or dissect or whatever. So I admire you guys' commitment to reading to enhance your understanding of things. It's the subject matter that also bores me, because I can't think of how reading anything to do with the Bible is going to help or benefit anyone. You know?
Yeah, it's a certain predisposition, isn't it? If you're wired a certain way, it comes much easier. Tash isn't wired the same way that I am. Some of the stuff I'm reading, and she looks at it and she's like, "What the hell is that? That looks like the worst thing." Yeah, it's just like, early church fathers on this particular obscure thing, and it's just like,
wow.
But I love it.
Now.
I'm all in it. This is like the greatest. Some theological disposition on suffering or whatever it is. And it's like a cup of tea. But
it actually broadens so much. Like, because Lou just devours them. Nothing factual generally, but her knowledge of stuff is so broad. Now I get my other knowledge in other places, but not to the I don't know what I would have to do to try and come up with her understanding. Is insane, because she just reads and reads and reads and reads. How could you not possibly learn and expand your vocabulary, your understanding, your intelligence by reading? And I don't.
Yeah, it's a great thing. I'm big on my kids with it. They're all good readers.
Yeah, good.
But it's only because I love it so much. I've almost forced it on them in the early days, but now that's kind of picked up their own steam. And I'm like, read whatever you want, but read. It's a good thing. But yeah, I like to read things also that I disagree with, that challenge me. Because that's the only other problem with reading is you can get in a vacuum. It's like if I'm only reading people that I just agree with 100%, it's just an echo chamber of my own theology. You never challenge to think. And there'll be books I read and I go, 70% of that I'm on board with and I'm challenged me, and that's great. And there's 30% that I flat out disagree with, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be all the same. It's not a problem. It's good. And there'd be many times where my beliefs evolved and changed and has been challenged because I've read something that I've never looked at it from that position. I've never understood that point of view. And I may still disagree with it, but I understand it better. I've got a greater empathy for people who hold that position, because I get it. It's not a stupid position to hold. It was only stupid in my mind because I didn't understand it. Now I understand it. So it's not a stupid position. I might still disagree with it, but I get your logic behind thinking that way. I understand verses that you've used to do and that allows me to have more patience and grace and understanding and empathy with people that I disagree with, and that's a beautiful thing. That's the only way that we humanity moves forward. Is when we allow people to have diverse beliefs, and yet we don't demonize them for them. We understand that even if we disagree, we can love them and journey forward.
Sure. I mean, it's like the guys here tonight. I mean, I enjoy comical writing. I think it's really liberating and fun. It's just
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Just
I do.
Yeah.
But mate, I'm gonna have to make a move. It's 11:15. I'm well past my bedtime.
Yeah, I don't have a bedtime, unfortunately.
Mate, you can keep going, mate. You just keep this rolling.
Oh yeah. I will keep it going as long as there's someone there. I don't find talking to myself overly exciting. Although I'm usually right about myself when I talk to myself, so which is
good
encouraging.
arguments.
Yeah, we're encouraging. Yeah, I mean, look, one day Jenk and Kyle will get to the point where they will find some degree of truth in what they're saying, and they'll celebrate it, no doubt. But in the meantime, I'm out as well. See you all next week. We hope we're trying to. Actually, there was a comment back there. I wanted to mention something. We need what was it? A fundamental Christian.
Oh yeah.
Mate, bring it on. If someone wants to be a permanent part of this debate, we can give you the link every week to be a part of the podcast, because we
a fervent evangelical on the panel.
That would be. I could really enjoy bashing up a fervent evangelical. And I mean that metaphorically, of course. But yeah, thanks, guys. We hope to be here next week, and we hope to be here every week. We're struggling with getting some numbers so that we have a bunch of people. As we first started with it, we had about 4 or 5, so that we're a group, and if someone's not available, we don't sort of crumble and fall. We don't have enough people involved in it, and that. So, and plus where it could go, whether we could broaden it and develop it into whatever, not sure. But hopefully, if we're not here next Wednesday, rest assured that if we decide to end the whole thing finally, I will let everyone know, so you're not just left wondering. But thank you so much for continuing to come back. In the slight chance that we might be available, I love that loyalty, for want of another word, but we really appreciate it, and we do intend to be here every Wednesday. But unfortunately, just life gets in the way, and it makes it harder, because it's not a job per se. It's much easier to not do it when the pressure's on, rather than feeling committed to do something. If you don't feel up to it or whatever. So thanks a lot, Kyle. I subbed.
Subscribed.
What do you mean by? Sorry?
Subscribe.
Oh,
Subscribe.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I'd forgotten all about the subscriptions. We were desperately trying to get to 100 so that Facebook would put us back onto the live broadcast mode like it is on YouTube. And they said, you need to get to 100 and we'll put you back on Facebook. Well, I gave up asking for that because the numbers didn't seem to go up. So we appreciate that. So if we get there, thanks, Jen. Thanks so much for joining us and being a part of it. Kyle, I'm sticking around if you want to stay here and talk about stuff or whatever. Luke has to have his warm milk and cookies and head off to bed so he can get up at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.
You know me too well. But I should be here next Wednesday. So look, if we're on, we're on. And it's been awesome seeing meeting Kyle and seeing Jenk back. Yeah. And there's probably about 1,000 other people just quiet in the wings that don't have, they don't want to jump in there on the chat. That's fine. That's good. Yeah. But it's been good seeing all your voice.
Yeah, it's always hard to know. Who's out there actually just wants to check it out but don't necessarily want to be involved. That is absolutely cool. If you just want to let us know that you're just even listening but you don't want to talk other than saying I'm here, I'm listening, it's shit, it's good, whatever, please do that, because it's really difficult to continue on. I spent 40 years in radio in a studio, not being able to see anyone, and it's a really bizarre situation, talking to no one, but knowing there's people out there listening, and when you know about it, that they're tuned in. It really is helpful, and it keeps us going. So that'd be fabulous. Yeah, thanks, Kyle. You take care of yourself too. Thanks, guys, for being fabulous. I'll stick around for a little bit and see if anyone else joins in as well. But in the meantime, thanks, guys. Hopefully we'll see you next Wednesday, which will be, oh my God, is it the 23rd of April already today? That is mental. So just about the end of the week. It'll be the 30th, in fact, next Wednesday. Hopefully we'll be here 8 o'clock Australian Western Standard Time for an atheist, a believer, and a pastor walk into a bar. I shall stick around, so I'll talk to you shortly. Luke, thank you so much, mate. Really appreciate it.
See you later.
And we'll catch you soon, mate.
Done deal. Look forward to it.
Bud. See you, mate.
See you guys.
Man. Catch ya. And then there was one. If you are listening or you are a part of this podcast, please let me know. End me out of my misery. If no one's here, then obviously I'll wrap it up for this week. It is now, 20 past 11 Australian Western Standard Time, Wednesday, half an hour or so, 40 minutes away from being Thursday, right here in Perth, Western Australia. Interested to hear what you want to, if you want to talk about the Pope. Have you heard anything? Is there a decision made as yet? Are you interested? If you're not, that is absolutely fine. I'm interested, I guess, in the fact that it's a kind of a global thing. There's not necessarily many things that happen in the world that seem to touch all corners of the world and interest people. Getting a new pope seems to have that impact. It seems to, it really does. It really seems to enthrall so many people, apart from the fact that there are more Catholics in the world than any other religion. I think that's pretty fair statement to make. So it's naturally a huge event. The fact that the Pope just passed away, Pope Francis, the Argentinian. Who's next? Did you hear me mention before that there's a 45-year-old Aussie involved, a cardinal, very, very young. He has got absolutely zero chance of becoming the Pope for two reasons. One, he's only 45, and that's not what generally happens when voting for a Pope. They're usually someone in their senior years, and they're not from Australia. They never have been. They probably never will be, or from the UK or America. Odds on probably Africa, maybe this time round. We shall see. We shall see. Either way, they'll be announcing very, very shortly if they do have finally a majority vote from all of the cardinals that are there currently. It's all very secretive. It's all very movie-like. I can't think of the name of the film that's just come out that everyone's talking about. Didn't write it down. I want to see it. No. All right. If there's nobody else listening or wants to join in and have a chat, or just let me know that you are there, I shall bid you a farewell, I think, and wrap up this Wednesday edition of this podcast. An atheist, a believer, and a pastor walk into a bar. If you want to head off, that's fine and dandy. Thank you so much for your company. Look forward to catching you next Wednesday. It'll be the 30th. We'll kick off again from 8 o'clock Australian Western Standard Time on Wednesday, the 30th of April, 2025. Thank you so much for your company tonight. Have a ripper. Look after yourself. We'll talk soon. Cheers.